Chapter 1141. Everyone could imagine such a scene. A cute lowly wearing a cute pink and white princess dress and white cotton socks was actually riding on the neck of a woman. Moreover, this woman's long legs were already taller than the lowly's entire height. When she was riding on Kang Ene's neck, Kang Ene's heels only reached her calves. Moreover, this woman was very beautiful. She was the goddess in the hearts of all the men in Yuzhang City. Under normal circumstances, everyone would often see a scene of a young and beautiful mother riding on the neck of a cute and silly daughter. However, once this scene was reversed, and the mother was riding on the neck of the lowly daughter, this scene would be indescribable. Anyway, everyone suffered a huge visual and mental impact, an impact that could not be erased in a lifetime. Later on, many gentlemen in Yuzhang City were affected by this scene in front of them. It deeply inspired them to create doujinshi paintings that made people's blood boil, but at the same time, they didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Later on, a huge school of lowly was born, the Lowly Night School. Jiyu Xianyuan was also regarded as the ancestor of the Lowly Night School by these gentlemen, and was later deeply admired, of course, because this scene had a huge negative impact on a certain Gendi. This school was also deeply suppressed. It was not until many years later that they dared to come out in the open. For a period of time in the future, all of them had to hide in the internet and tremble. In fact, at this time, Jiyu Xianyuan also felt very subtle. In the past, he was a guy who was ridden by a lowly. Qingpin's favorite thing was to settle down in Guhan's baby pouch. The story and rumors of a lowly living in Guhan's arms were also widely spread in Yuzhang City. Now that the situation had been reversed, Jiyu Xianyuan was riding on the body of a lowly. This feeling was very subtle. While it made Jiyu Xianyuan feel awkward, it did indeed hide a wonderful sense of comfort. Of course, Jiyu Xianyuan was riding on Kang Ene's body not because of some special hobby, but because Kang Ene's body shape was the same as Jiyu Xianyuan's, so Jiyu Xianyuan could more easily launch a fierce attack on Adam. Kang Na in her lowly form was not as strong as Kang Na in her dragon form, but there was not too much of a drop. Her speed and strength were also at the level of flood-level Yuan Ku. As Jiyu Xianyuan's mount, Kang Na could still provide a huge boost to Jiyu Xianyuan's ability. And for Jiyu Xianyuan, the most important thing was that Jiyu Xianyuan became very flexible. Don't look at how powerful dragon knights were in novels. Actually, it was completely bullshit. Imagine yourself sitting on top of a mountain and wanting to launch an attack on another mountain. You would know how ridiculous it was. Unless your knight spear was a few kilometers long, you wouldn't even know if you could hit your enemy. It was like a 3 or 4-year-old boy's little brother entering the body of a seasoned European or American woman. It would feel empty inside, without any feeling. When a human rode on the back of a dragon, the role of the human itself became very insignificant. At most, it would be like Jiyu Xianyuan just now, secretly commanding the dragon to fight. If a human wanted to help the dragon in battle, it would be almost like a fantasy. However, once Kang Na transformed into the same size as Jiyu Xianyuan, becoming the size that a real mount should have, then the strength of a giant dragon would be fully displayed. Firstly, Jiyu Xianyuan's speed would be terrifyingly enhanced. Kang Na in her lowly form would be able to reach a terrifying speed of 10 times the speed of sound. This speed was 20 times Jiyu Xianyuan's maximum speed. This would allow a swordsman who was extremely skilled in swordsmanship to possess extreme speed. This way, the effect of 1 + 1 wouldn't be as simple as 2. Moreover, Kang Na could attach her thunder and lightning to Jiyu Xianyuan's Immortal Slayer sword, so that apart from its own attribute, the Immortal Slayer sword had an additional layer of powerful thunder and lightning effect. Therefore, everyone saw this scene. Jiyu Xianyuan and Kang Na's silhouettes had completely left the range of human vision. They could only see innumerable lightning bolts constantly revolving around Adam. Almost in an instant, Adam's body was riddled with innumerable wounds, and every wound was flickering with golden lightning bolts. While causing tremendous damage to Adam, it was also able to prevent Adam's astonishing regeneration ability from automatically healing. At this moment, Adam's greatest weakness was revealed. As one of the purest humans, Adam could still not be affected by the ring of logic. He could purely use his purest strength to cause tremendous damage to everything around him. However, once he faced a powerful supernatural ability, his pure strength would become limited. If it was any other flood-class Yuan Ku, he could release a powerful area of effect attack around him, or simply an unavoidable attack that would definitely hit him. This way, he could at least deal with Jiyu Shen Yuan and Kang Na's fighting style. Unfortunately, Adam didn't have such strength. He could only use his hands to helplessly swat that annoying fly like a human swatting a fly. Under normal circumstances, after 20 to 30 attempts, a human might be able to swat that damned fly once or twice. However, once this fly possessed supersonic speed, wanting to swat such a fly would become extremely laughable. This was simply an impossible task. To be honest, such a battle was quite boring. People couldn't even see how the one who took the initiative to attack. They could only see that Adam had no ability to resist at all. He was constantly passively enduring the attacks. More and more wounds appeared on his body, and in the end, he became weaker and weaker. He no longer had the awe-inspiring imposing manner of Ling. In this way, Adam's vitality was constantly depleted by the combination of Jiyu Shen Yuan and Kang Na. In less than 20 minutes, a lake of blood appeared under Adam's feet. After draining the last drop of blood from his body, he fell straight to the ground and closed his pale yellow, turbid eyes. A dimensional vortex began to appear and absorb Adam's body. This time, Adam was truly dead. He became the first flood-class Yuan Ku to die in the hands of Jiyu Shen Yuan. Not counting the Nether River Patriarch, he was a desolate-class Yuan Ku. After Adam's body completely returned, Jiyu Shen Yuan finally exited from her lightning state and rode on Kang Na's neck back to the city wall of the core zone. Phew. It's a little more tiring than I thought. Don't look at how he died in the hands of Jiyu Shen Yuan without any ability to fight back. In fact, Jiyu Shen Yuan did not have it easy. Kang Na's speed far exceeded Jiyu Shen Yuan's usual speed. Jiyu Shen Yuan had to be fully focused and highly focused in order to barely be able to fight at 20 times the speed of sound. Every minute was a huge test for Jiyu Shen Yuan. It was more than a few times more difficult than the test of the 12 skyscraping temples in the game. Therefore, when Jiyu Shen Yuan once again appeared in front of everyone, her body was completely soaked in sweat. Her clothes were tightly stuck to her body under the absorption of the sweat, reflecting a perfect body full of youthful energy. At this moment, the entire core zone wall was filled with the smell of hormones. Jiyu Shen Yuan immediately noticed this smell. As a man, Jiyu Shen Yuan naturally hated this smell. Therefore, she immediately released the sword chi in her body and pushed up all the clothes stuck to her body. At the same time, the sword chi quickly rubbed against her clothes, producing a huge amount of heat that quickly evaporated the sweat in her clothes. In just the blink of an eye, Jiyu Shen Yuan's soaked clothes became extremely dry again. Sigh. What a pity. If only I could look at her a few more times. Everyone sighed in their hearts. It was a pity that such a beautiful sight could only be seen for a short while, and could not be enjoyed for a long time. Sword Immortal Ling Shu looked at Jiyu Shen Yuan with a complicated expression. He had thought that Jiyu Shen Yuan was only planning to lure Adam out of the normal zone, and then use Kang Na to end the battle outside of Yuzhong City. But he did not expect to be slapped in the face again in the end. Jiyu Shen Yuan actually killed Adam in the city. At the same time, what was even more frightening was that Jiyu Shen Yuan had kept the entire battlefield within an area of less than 1 square kilometer. Although all the land within this 1 square kilometer had been turned into ruins, other areas were safe and sound, unaffected by Adam's torment. This was already the best result for Yuzhong City. Otherwise, even if Adam was lured out of the city, there would probably be countless high-rise buildings destroyed in the battle along the way, just like when Adam came. How strong is this Jiyu Shen Yuan's combat strength? Sword Immortal Ling Shu's eyes wandered as he thought to himself. The fact that Jiyu Shen Yuan has combat strength equivalent to an immortal sword rank sword wielder is already undeniable. What Sword Immortal Ling Shu is really doubtful about is whether Jiyu Shen Yuan has the combat strength of a Hong-level Yuan Ku, which is an Emperor sword rank sword wielder. Jiyu Shen Yuan didn't have it, but there were indeed 2 Hong-level Yuan Ku who had fallen in Jiyu Shen Yuan's hands. But even if Jiyu Shen Yuan had the combat strength of an emperor sword rank sword wielder, these two victories were not entirely based on Jiyu Shen Yuan's own strength. The previous victory over Kang Na was because Kang Na was too hungry, and she was seriously injured by Wang Shu Sword's all-out attack. As for defeating Adam this time, one reason was that Adam's weakness was too obvious, and the other was that Jiyu Shen Yuan could also rely on Kang Na's strength to do so. From this, it could be seen that there was still a gap between Jiyu Shen Yuan's combat strength and that of a Hong-level Yuan Ku. Forget it, let's not think about this troublesome problem. The stronger Jiyu Shen Yuan was, the better it would be for Yuzhang City. This was for sure. Cough cough. Miss Shen Yuan, shouldn't you come down now? Right at this time, Misaka Mikoto suddenly coughed and looked at the little lowly Kang Na who was riding under Jiyu Shen Yuan's crotch. Ah! Jiyu Shen Yuan grabbed Kang Na who was under her crotch and pulled her into her arms. What? Kang Na who was pulled out was still a little dissatisfied. She pouted and said, I haven't had enough of being ridden. Chapter 1142. A total of 1623 swordbearers died, 3,654 swordbearers lost their ability to fight, 7,213 sword maidens were lost, and 4,002 sword maidens were unable to be repaired, including 3 natural sword maidens, ancient sword maidens Spring Wind Sword, ancient sword maidens Sea Snake Sword, and treasure sword maidens Guanghan Sword. A total of 237,261 ordinary human casualties were found, 196,213 relatively intact bodies were found, 35,217 unidentifiable bodies were found, and 5,371 bodies were completely missing. Among them, 215,637 people died in battle, 100761 died in the battle to defend the city walls in the normal area, 114917 died in the battle to defend the city walls in the core area, of which 56238 died in the battle to defend the wall of flesh and blood. A total of 2,271 buildings were lost in battle in the normal area, among which 1062 buildings were completely destroyed, 1211 buildings required urgent repair, and about 1.03 million residents were left homeless, currently temporarily resettled in various shelters. A total of 21 buildings were lost in battle in the core area, all residents have been properly resettled. A total of 163 damaged areas were found in the outer city walls, the total damaged area is 12.7 kilometers long. A total of 38 damaged areas were found in the core area, the total damaged area is 1.9 kilometers long. Apart from buildings, a total of 1,360 billion renminbi was lost in various economic products in the normal area, including 830 billion renminbi was lost in the private economy, and 630 billion renminbi was lost in public property. Food and other daily necessities were moved in time, and all of them were well preserved. There were no large-scale losses, which can last for 10 years and 6 months. Sword Immortal Ling Shu stared at the piles and piles of data in front of him with a headache. This was the second day after the battle had ended. Yuzhang City's response speed could be considered quite fast. In the short span of a day, they had accurately calculated all of the property losses and reported it to Sword Immortal Ling Shu's desk. Looking at these shocking losses, Sword Immortal Ling Shu didn't appear to be very sad, and there was even a hint of a smile on his face. This wasn't because Sword Immortal Ling Shu was heartless, but because these losses were much smaller than Sword Immortal Ling Shu had expected. According to Sword Immortal Ling Shu's original plan, the entire Yuzhang city would be completely destroyed in this sudden attack. By then, the total losses would be tens or even hundreds of times greater than the current losses. After all, by then, the entire Yuzhang city would no longer exist. The remaining humans would probably still be slowly advancing on the long road of escape. If the current losses were equivalent to cutting off a piece of Yuzhang city's flesh, then the losses that Sword Immortal Ling Shu envisioned were equivalent to a death by 1,000 cuts. Sword Immortal Ling Shu was already very satisfied with this result. The foundation of Yuzhang City was still intact, and it would only take 3 to 4 years at most for these losses to be recovered, and Yuzhang City could also be rebuilt. Under his leadership, Yuzhong City did not suffer the complete destruction of the previous few major invasions. It's all thanks to Miss Jiyu Shenyuan this time. Sword Immortal Ling Shu knew very well that the reason why Yuzhong City had been able to escape this calamity had nothing to do with him. The true culprit was that young mistress Jiyu Shenyuan who had suddenly appeared. If it wasn't for Jiyu Shenyuan, then what awaited Yuzhong City would have been the latter outcome. Speaking of which, I really can't bear to part with her. Young mistress Jiyu Shenyuan actually left just like that. I didn't even properly thank her once. What made Sword Immortal Ling Shu feel a little ashamed was that after the battle was completely over, Jiyu Shenyuan didn't stay in Yuzhong City for even a single night. She directly left Yuzhong City in the afternoon. Jiyu Shenyuan didn't say why she was in such a hurry to leave, but Sword Immortal Ling Shu could vaguely guess some of it. It was nothing more than Shi Jueyuan's life and Lucy Hua, who he had sent to London. After the battle in Yuzhong City, Jiyu Shenyuan must have been very worried about her younger brother's disciple, so she hurried over to bring Lucy Hua back. Thinking of this, Sword Immortal Ling Shu felt waves of guilt welling up in his heart. If he hadn't conspired with Shi Jueyuan back then, how could Shi Jueyuan have the authority to directly send away a sword pavilion lord? These were all mistakes he made when his desire for power clouded his mind. Sword Immortal Ling Shu had also told Jiyu Shenyuan before that he hoped to set off with Jiyu Shenyuan and bring Lucy Hua back. But Jiyu Shenyuan refused. In her words, there were still a lot of troubles in Yuzhong City that needed Sword Immortal Ling Shu to resolve, so it was best for Sword Immortal Ling Shu to stay in Yuzhong City. This was the result she wanted to see. Jiyu Shenyuan was speaking the truth, so Sword Immortal Ling Shu didn't insist anymore. He could only watch as Jiyu Shenyuan left Yuzhong City alone under the setting sun. But this young mistress Jiyu Shenyuan really left me with a huge problem. After expressing his longing and gratitude for Jiyu Shenyuan, Sword Immortal Ling Shu couldn't help but fall into a state of distress. There was no other reason than that Jiyu Shenyuan left him with a huge problem, the lightning dragon, Kang Na Kamuyi. According to Jiyu Shenyuan, Kang Na had made a deal with Yuzhong City. Every month, Yuzhong City would give Kang Na enough high-purity nuclear fuel rods to consume, and Kang Na would also become the protector of Yuzhong City. Kang Na's trading partners were all in Yuzhong City, so Kang Na should naturally also live in Yuzhong City, and not by her side. Sword Immortal Ling Shu was very conflicted about this. Kang Na was a flood-level Yuan Ku. If she could wholeheartedly fight to protect Yuzhong City, then it would naturally be a great thing for Yuzhong City. But the problem was that Kang Na was still a Yuan Ku after all, and they were both natural enemies of humans. Although she was living well in the city now, if she suddenly went berserk and suddenly wreaked havoc in the city, then Yuzhong City would be caught off guard and very likely suffer far greater losses than yesterday. Actually, the best solution was to let Kang Na find a place to stay outside of Yuzhong City. That way, even if they went berserk, they wouldn't cause great harm to Yuzhong City itself. Moreover, if Yuzhong City was attacked, she could also appear at the first instance to protect Yuzhong City. Unfortunately, this suggestion was rejected by Kang Na. After eating a meal of red braised pork at Chanel, she completely refused to leave the core area. Moreover, she brazenly expressed that even if she was chased out of the core area, she would try her best to come back. For example, she would launch an attack on Yuzhong City's super-dimensional protection system a few days ago, and so on. Sword Immortal Ling Shu and Jiyu Shenyuan had no choice but to agree to let Kang Na stay in the core area. However, both of them had to bring along sealing equipment to seal off their own powers. At the same time, Jiyu Shenyuan arranged for them to stay in the Phoenix House, which was also the house of Jiyu Shenyuan's younger brother, Guhan, in the core area. It was stipulated that Kang Na was not allowed to leave Mount Emperor without the approval of the Sword Committee headquarters. At the same time, Sword Immortal Ling Shu also promised Kang Na that he would send about a ton of various delicacies every day as the price for her to obediently stay in Mount Emperor as a foodie. After that, Misaka Mikoto privately told Sword Immortal Ling Shu not to worry too much about Kang Na. She told Sword Immortal Ling Shu that the impurities in Kang Na's body had completely disappeared. At this time, Kang Na could not be considered as Yuan Ku. At most, She was just a lazy little female dragon. As long as she was fed well every day, there would not be too much of a problem. As for Erlangshen, Yang Jian, this fellow immediately returned to his Erlangshen temple at the mouth of the Guan River after the battle. However, Erlangshen, Yang Jian, promised Sword Immortal Ling Shu that within 3 years, as long as Sword Immortal Ling Shu sent someone to Erlangshen Temple to send him a message, regardless of the reason, he would immediately rush to Yuzhong City and fight to protect Yuzhong City. Regarding this, Sword Immortal Ling Shu secretly thanked the heavens and earth. If Erlangshen, Yang Jian, was like Kang Na and stubbornly refused to leave the core area, then Sword Immortal Ling Shu really would not be able to do anything to Erlangshen, Yang Jian. However, Kang Na's problem was only one of the bigger ones. There was still an even bigger problem, and that was the Ring of Law that was currently hovering in the sky above Yuzhong City. After capturing Ling Bolai and Asuka, the Fusang Celestial System should have been completely defeated. This Ring of Law should have immediately returned to Fusang Island and left the territory of Yuzhong City. However, this Ring of Law seemed to have decided that Yuzhong City was its home. It stayed in the sky above Yuzhong City and did not go anywhere else. As a result, all supernatural forces within 500 kilometers of Yuzhong City were still in a state of lockdown. It was a very awkward situation. Yuzhong City could not do anything to the Ring of Law. Even if it was Sword Immortal Ling Shu, as long as he left the protection of Yuzhong City's super-dimensional wall system, he would immediately become a mortal who had lost his sword essence. There was no way he could do anything to the Ring of Law in the sky. Moreover, according to the analysis of the Ring of Law by the research department, this Ring of Law was not a physical entity, but an existence that existed between spirit and rules. Against such an existence, even if it was Jendi, he would not be able to do anything. Unless this Jendi was the Jendi who was proficient in rules, then he would be able to forcibly expel the Ring of Law. In short, this was a message to Sword Immortal Ling Shu that unless this Ring of Law wanted to leave on its own, it could stay in the sky above Yuzhong City as long as it wanted. Even Longsha Jendi would not be able to expel the Ring of Law. Sword Immortal Ling Shu thought about it again. This Ring of Law did not seem to be too bad for Yuzhong City. The effect of the Ring of Law was also effective for Yuan Ku. On the contrary, humans who had the protection of the super-dimensional wall system could instead use their own power freely through the super-dimensional wall system. In this way, even if Yuan Ku gathered an army several times larger than before, he would not be able to break through Yuzhong City's defenses. Yuzhong City was many times safer than it would be without the Ring of Law. From a certain perspective, this Ring of Law could be considered as the guardian of Yuzhong City. However, there were other problems as well. Yuzhong City itself could not support the 40 million people in Yuzhong City. Yuzhong City had to make full use of the land around Yuzhong City for farming, mining, industry, and other things in order to support the 40 million people in Yuzhong City. Previously, Yuzhong City relied on the protection of the swordbearers to establish an absolute safety zone of about 200 kilometers. However, once the swordbearers left Yuzhong City, they would become ordinary people. The idea of relying on the swordbearers to protect the surroundings of Yuzhong City became an unrealistic delusion. Thus, the only people who could protect the surroundings of Yuzhong City were the ordinary people themselves. Chapter 1143. In the first few days, Sword Immortal Ling Shu was still hopeful that the Ring of Perfection would leave on its own. However, after a month had passed, the Ring of Perfection had not moved at all, and Sword Immortal Ling Shu's hopes were dashed. Then, Misaka Mikoto sent news to Yuzhong City. The 200-level Yuan Ku from the Fusang Celestial System proposed a negotiation with the Freedom Metropolis. As long as Yuzhong City released Ling Bolai and Ming Rixiang, the Fusang Celestial System was willing to remove the Ring of Perfection floating above Yuzhong City. Otherwise, the Ring of Perfection would remain above Yuzhong City until Ling Bolai and Ming Rixiang were released. Ling Bolai was the main culprit behind the deaths of more than 200,000 people in Yuzhong City. Of these 200,000 people, more than 100,000 died directly at the hands of Ling Bolai's robot, Adam. Yuzhong City had long been filled with anger towards Ling Bolai and Ming Rixiang. If it was not for the sake of research, Ming Rixiang and Ling Bolai would have been executed by sword immortal Ling Shu in public. Taking Ling Bolai for research was a reasonable outcome that the people could accept. However, if Ling Bolai and Ming Rixiang were used in exchange, the people of Yuzhang City would definitely tear themselves apart. Moreover, if they released Ling Bolai because of such a threat, then the Fuso divine system would make trouble for Yuzhang City in a few days and order Yuzhang City to pay all kinds of prices. Wouldn't Yuzhang City become an out-and-out rich idiot? After careful consideration, Sword Immortal Ling Shu righteously rejected the Fusang Celestial System's request, and the Ring of Perfection would remain above Yuzhang City's head. As such, how to effectively deal with the threat posed by the Ring of Perfection in the long run had become a problem that Sword Immortal Ling Shu had to solve. At this time, Sword Immortal Ling Shu thought of the hot weapons that could shine in battle. Under the illumination of the Ring of Perfection, the power of hot weapons was fully displayed. Even the most elite Yuan Ku army was utterly defeated in the face of hot weapons, and they were forced to retreat by the humans. When the sword-bearers lost their strength outside the city, firearms could perfectly fill the gap left by the sword-bearers. It could even be said that the firearms were superior to the sword-bearers. Before this, due to the limited number of sword-bearers, Yuan Ku could often sneak into the vicinity of Yuzhang City and cause great harm to the people working there. However, once ordinary people and firearms were used, this drawback would no longer exist. With Yuzhang's industrial system operating at full capacity, Yuzhang could produce 100,000 firearms in a month. In a year, they could arm 1 million soldiers. Coupled with the million firearms left behind, Yuzhang City could have an army of 2 million soldiers. These 2 million soldiers could build a ring of fortifications around Yuzhang City, and the area within 500 kilometers around Yuzhang City would be impregnable. Not even a single Yuan Ku would be able to invade Yuzhang City through the defensive line, and the surroundings of Yuzhang City would be completely safe. What was even more amazing was that the recruitment of 2 million soldiers did not affect Yuzhang City's own productivity. Yuzhang City's population was surplus to begin with, and the labor force it really needed was only 3 to 4 million. In all of Yuzhang City, there were about 7 to 8 million able-bodied males who stayed at home with nothing to do. They could only rely on Yuzhang City's living allowance, and fight in the game to kill their time and excess energy. However, this was undoubtedly a huge unstable factor for society. Now, the most unstable 2 million of these 7 to 8 million able-bodied males were selected and sent into the army to undergo rigorous military training. The security level of Yuzhang City would be raised by who knew how many times. From a certain perspective, this was a good thing for everyone. Therefore, at this moment, there was a detailed plan drawn up by the elite advisors of the Sword Committee headquarters in front of Sword Immortal Ling Shu. According to the plan drawn up on this plan, Yuzhang City would use a year's time to manufacture all kinds of firearms and equipment, build fortifications around Yuzhang City, and train a regular firearm army of 2 million soldiers. In this way, Yuzhang City's security would be impregnable, and there would be nothing to worry about. Sword Immortal Ling Shu immediately approved this plan, but he couldn't help but recall what Jiyu Shenyuan had said to him before she left. Sword Immortal Ling Shu still remembered that when Jiyu Shenyuan said these words to him, her expression was very serious, and even a little fearful. These troops must be disbanded immediately. Jiyu Shenyuan said resolutely and decisively, all firearms must be taken back immediately, and these people must be forbidden from touching firearms for life. At the same time, those ordinary people who temporarily hold military power should be commended, rewarded with citizenship, or given certain special privileges and rights. In short, we just have to hang them up high and let them be idols. We must not allow them to have any unrealistic thoughts. Especially that Zhao Chenfeng. I suggest that he be given a grand commendation and participate in all kinds of variety shows every day. After that, we should give him the status of a council member. In short, let him be immersed in endless vanity and quarrels, and not give him any more opportunities to touch firearms or troops. Sword Immortal Ling Shu remembered that Jiyu Shenyuan had warned him about firearms many times, far more than she had warned him about other aspects. And there was only one central idea in these words: firearms troops were an extremely dangerous thing. This time, it was only because of Yuzhang City's crisis that they had no choice but to disband firearms troops immediately after this. At the same time, all topics related to firearms must be suppressed in public. Yuzhang City would never need firearms troops, and this was a huge threat to Yuzhang City. Isn't Miss Shen Yuan a little too conservative? It feels a bit like those stubborn conservatives in those novels who hold on to their ancestors' things and refuse to let go. Sword Immortal Ling Shu actually didn't quite agree with Jiyu Xuanyuan's advice. He was very clear why Jiyu Shenyuan was worried. She was worried that when ordinary people mastered martial power, they would attack and retaliate against the sword-bearers, thereby causing chaos in the entire society. But Sword Immortal Ling Shu only felt that Jiyu Shenyuan was making a big fuss over a minor issue. Did Jiyu Shenyuan not see how those ordinary people used their own flesh and blood to block the enemy's attack at the last moment of Yuzhang City? What wonderful companions and comrades they were. All of them were willing to shed their blood for Yuzhang City. Sword Immortal Ling Shu didn't believe that such a group of hot-blooded men would eventually become the scourge of Yuzhang City. Moreover, whether or not these troops would rebel depended on who was in control. As long as all the middle and high-ranking officers in the troops were controlled by sword-bearers, then the control of the troops would be very stable. Even if some ordinary ambitious people wanted to cause trouble, they wouldn't be able to do so. As for that Zhao Chenfeng, Sword Immortal Ling Shu could indeed sense that this guy was filled with ambition, the ambition to climb up the ranks. But which youngster these days didn't have ambition? Wasn't he, Sword Immortal Ling Shu, also filled with ambition in the past? If he, Sword Immortal Ling Shu, didn't have ambition, then he wouldn't have been able to reach the level of a Sword Immortal. Of course, the command of the firearms troops couldn't be given to this Zhao Chenfeng. Sword Immortal Ling Shu also decided to respect Jiyu Xuanyuan's opinion and remove Zhao Chenfeng from the direct command position, not allowing him to directly command the troops. But this Zhao Chenfeng was indeed a very talented person. In the entire Yuzhang City, there was no one more proficient in firearms than him. It would be too much of a pity to let him become a member of the council who would wrangle with others all day long. After a period of careful consideration, Sword Immortal Ling Shu decided to establish a firearms military academy. Then, he appointed Zhao Chenfeng as the principal of this military academy. This was a perfect opportunity to make use of his strengths and help Yuzhang City cultivate a group of military talents who were proficient in firearms. Of course, this was a decision to be made a month later. Right now, Sword Immortal Ling Shu didn't have time to consider such a complicated matter. Finally, everything has been settled. Sword Immortal Ling Shu let out a long sigh of relief when he saw that the mountainous pile of documents in front of him had all been approved. His busy day had finally come to an end. Just as Sword Immortal Ling Shu was preparing to go back to rest, a series of heavy knocks on his door gave him a fright. Who is it? Who dares to directly knock on my door? Sword Immortal Ling Shu's expression turned a little ugly when he heard the knocks on his door. The standard procedure to see Sword Immortal Ling Shu was to make an appointment in advance and then send a message through his own mystic technique. Who would directly knock on his office door like this? Although the door was meant for people to knock in the first place. Come in. Sword Immortal Ling Shu wanted to see just who was so daring. In the end, a man rushed in with an anxious expression on his face. This man was about 30 years old and had a dignified appearance. He exuded the aura of a noble young master. However, his face was pale and his steps were unsteady. It was clear that this noble young master didn't know how to control his desires normally. I was wondering who it was. So it's third young master Shi. Sword Immortal Ling Shu recognized this noble young master. This person was none other than Shi Jueyuan's third son, the fellow known as third young master Shi. Shi Jueyuan had 3 sons. His first son died a few days after being born. Apparently, he was born with a congenital deficiency that even the medical pod couldn't cure. His second son lived until he was 12 years old. However, at such a young age, he didn't learn good things. He wanted to use his status to screw his beautiful teacher. In the end, this beautiful teacher had a sword wielder's boyfriend. This sword wielder didn't care about Shi Jueyuan at all and directly killed the little brat. Then, he ran off to Yangjing City. Because this sword wielder had a recording of second young master Shi forcing himself on his girlfriend, and Yangjing City wasn't a place that cared about Shi Jueyuan, this sword wielder was sentenced to guard the beacon for 5 years. Right now, he was still living a carefree life. Therefore, the third young master of the Shi clan was Shi Jueyuan's last remaining descendant, and he was also spoiled to the extreme by Shi Jueyuan. He was treated like a child in the palm of his hand, afraid that he would fall, and in the mouth of his mouth, afraid that he would melt. He was a famous bastard in Yuzhang City. Shi Jueyuan had brought him to see Sword Immortal Ling Shu a few times, and he had even shamelessly asked Sword Immortal Ling Shu to take care of the third young master of the Shi clan. Looks like this idiot already knows that his old man is gone. Seeing third young master Shi's anxious expression, Sword Immortal Ling Shu knew that the news of Shi Jueyuan's death could no longer be hidden. Chapter 1144. Lord Ling Shu, my father has gone missing. I've searched the entire Yuzhang City, but I couldn't find him. In the end, I asked the headquarters of the Sword Committee, and they told me that my father's life signal has already stopped responding. They said that my father is dead. Is this true? Third young master Shi asked anxiously. Saying this, Sword Immortal Ling Shu couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Actually, third young master Shi had already asked him about Shi Jueyuan a few days ago, but he was deceived by Sword Immortal Ling Shu. Third young master Shi saw that he was being thwarted by Sword Immortal Ling Shu, so he could only ask the Sword Committee headquarters about Shi Jueyuan. After all, Shi Jueyuan was the head of the Emperor Sword family. His life and death was something that the Sword Committee headquarters had to pay attention to. Therefore, the Sword Committee headquarters would take the initiative to investigate Shi Jueyuan's situation. This way, Sword Immortal Ling Shu couldn't deceive them. Previously, Sword Immortal Ling Shu kept the news of Shi Jueyuan's death in Yuzhang City, and the information was also kept in Yuzhang City. He didn't report it to the Sword Committee headquarters. However, the Sword Committee headquarters had the highest authority in the human world. They had the right to access all the information stored in Yuzhang City's highest-level AI system. Sword Immortal Ling Shu didn't have the right or ability to stop them. The news of Shi Jueyuan's death could no longer be hidden. Since the Sword Committee headquarters said that your father's personal terminal has lost its signal, then your father's personal terminal has really lost its signal. He's probably dead, Sword Immortal Ling Shu said calmly. But that's not what you told me a few days ago. Didn't you tell my father that he only went missing in the battle with Yuan Ku? Didn't you tell me that he might still be alive? Third young master Shi couldn't suppress his emotions and roared. Watch your tone, Shi Tianshou. Sword Immortal Ling Shu slammed the table a few times in dissatisfaction. You're now facing the chairman of the Yuzhang City Sword Committee, a mighty immortal sword-tier sword wielder. As an ancient sword-tier sword wielder, have you forgotten the etiquette between superiors and subordinates? He scolded with a look of disgust. Shi Tianshou was third young master Shi's real name. When he heard Sword Immortal Ling Shu say his name out loud, third young master Shi knew that things were a little different from what he had expected. Yuzhang City was no longer the Yuzhang City of a few days ago. My apologies, Lord Ling Shu, I was rude. Third young master Shi lowered his head. As a child who has lost his father, I want to know how his current condition is. How did he die? Didn't you already go to the Sword Committee to ask? Didn't they tell you how your father died? Is there a need to ask me? Sword Immortal Ling Shu looked at third young master Shi with a teasing expression. It's that woman, it's that beautiful bitch who killed my father, isn't it? Third young master Shi's face turned hideous. Why? You already knew that my father died in the hands of that bitch. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't he arrest her right away? Avenge my father? You better watch your mouth. Sword Immortal Ling Shu scolded again. She is the savior of Yuzhang City. If it weren't for her, everyone in Yuzhang City, including you, would have died. She is not only your savior, but also the savior of the entire Yuzhang City. You must make this clear to me, or I will definitely make you bear the corresponding consequences. Bah! I don't need her to save me. The third young master of the Shi family spat. Our family has already packed up everything, and there are several spirit sword-bearers protecting us. We can hide in Yangjing City anytime, anywhere. We don't need that bitch to save us. Shameless scum. Hearing third young master Shi blatantly say that his family had already packed everything, and was even preparing to recruit spirit sword-level sword-bearers to protect them as they escaped, Sword Immortal Ling Shu could no longer contain his anger. He directly slapped third young master Shi across the face. Third young master Shi's entire body spun 360 degrees in the air, and finally fell straight to the ground with a crisp thud. This is the reason why Miss Shenyuan killed your father. Based on your father's cowardly attitude of wanting to abandon the lives of 40 million people in Yuzhong City, even if Miss Shenyuan didn't do anything, I, Sword Immortal Ling Shu, would have killed him and gotten rid of this scum, Sword Immortal Ling Shu said in a powerful voice. Heh. You finally admitted that you conspired with that bitch to kill my father. You are also one of the murderers. Third young master Shi clutched his face that was swollen like a piece of bread. Whatever you say. Sword Immortal Ling Shu had a look of disdain on his face. Who cared about such things? Me. Let me tell you, Sword Immortal Ling Shu, I've already recorded our entire conversation today. I'm going to share this conversation with all the spirit sword rank sword bearers and have them uphold justice for my father, the third young master of the Shi family yelled. Justice? Sword Immortal Ling Shu seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world. You actually have the face to talk about justice with me? Then go ahead. Go tell all the spirit sword level sword bearers what you said to me. Let's see whose side justice they're on. I'll send it to them right now. Third young master Shi panicked. Without another word, he took out his personal terminal and began to send messages to all the spirit sword level sword bearers stored in his personal terminal. But what happened next shocked third young master Shi. When he clicked to send the message, his personal terminal didn't give him the usual notification that the message had been delivered. Instead, it told him this. Sorry. You're not the other party's friend and cannot send a message. Why? Why aren't we friends anymore? We were just eating together a few days ago. Seeing this notification, third young master Shi was completely enraged. He couldn't accept this result at all. On the other hand, Sword Immortal Ling Shu was well aware of this result. In reality, immediately after the battle, Sword Immortal Ling Shu had called for a meeting with all the spirit sword level sword bearers. As for the specific content of the meeting, no one revealed it. But the first thing these spirit sword level sword bearers did after the meeting was to delete third young master Shi's friend list. After all, Shi Jueyuan was already dead. These spirit sword level sword bearers knew very well what kind of person third young master Shi was. He was someone who couldn't do anything right. Who would be willing to suck up to him? They just hoped that he wouldn't spread the fire to them. Dong. Right at this moment, Sword Immortal Ling Shu's personal terminal suddenly emitted a crisp and pleasant sound. Sword Immortal Ling Shu closed his eyes and looked at this message. A bitter smile appeared on his face. The arrest warrant has been issued. Take a look. Sword Immortal Ling Shu projected this message in the air. Third young master Shi raised his head and saw that this was a notification letter returned from the Sword Committee headquarters. Yuzhong City Sword Committee, we have received your notification regarding the death of spirit sword level sword bearer Shi Jueyuan. After verification, Shi Jueyuan did die at the hands of a female sword bearer. However, because the female sword bearer's personal terminal has been destroyed and her DNA information cannot be collected, no one matching the appearance of all the female sword bearers can be found. The criminal is temporarily determined to be an unknown female. At the same time, regarding the criminal named Jiyu Shenyuan that you reported, after comparison with the system's database, there is no female sword bearer named Jiyu Shenyuan in the database. This criminal is actually out of all the database, and the Sword Committee headquarters is unable to confirm her detailed identity. However, the Sword Committee headquarters will not tolerate any kind of fratricide. After a meeting of the Sword Committee headquarters, this criminal has been named Jiyu Shenyuan. At the same time, due to the highest level arrest warrant for the 8 cities that have been issued globally, any sword bearer who discovers the criminal Jiyu Shenyuan must immediately report it to their respective Sword Committee. If the criminal is too strong, it is not recommended that normal sword bearers arrest her. The arrest shall be carried out by the discipline committee of each base. December 12, 3011. World Sword Bearers Joint Committee Conference. This is. Third young master sure looked at the document and didn't know what to say. Looks like the Sword Committee headquarters reacted very quickly. I reported it to them yesterday, and they sent me a reply today. Sure enough, the death of an old man from the Emperor Sword family is a big deal. Sword Immortal Ling Shu showed this reply to third young master Shi to tell him that he, Sword Immortal Ling Shu, did not make any mistakes in the procedure, and that he shouldn't say anything more. Then when does Sword Immortal Ling Shu plan to send people to arrest this criminal? Third young master Shi raised his head and asked. Let's talk about this later. Right now there is a lot of reconstruction work to be done in Yuzhang City, and Miss Jiyu Xuanyuan's strength is not weaker than mine. How can normal sword bearers catch her? Sending her would just be a waste of time. In a few months, when I'm free, I'll look for her myself and see if I can find Miss Jiyu Xuanyuan. Sword Immortal Ling Shu waved his hand. All right, you can go now. To be honest, I don't really want to see you again. You. The veins on third young master Shi's face instantly bulged. Even an idiot could tell that Sword Immortal Ling Shu was trying to brush him off. It would take a few more months before he could relax. Let's see if everyone has already forgotten about this matter after a few months. Thinking back to what Sword Immortal Ling Shu had just said, Sword Immortal Ling Shu didn't say that he was going to capture Jiyu Xuanyuan, he only said that he was going to look for her. The meaning behind this was even more worth pondering. However, there was nothing wrong with Sword Immortal Ling Shu's words. There were indeed a lot of things to be done in Yuzhang City, and now was not the time for Sword Immortal Ling Shu to leave Yuzhang City. Third young master Shi had nothing to criticize Sword Immortal Ling Shu for. In the end, third young master Shi could only clench his fists and silently leave Sword Immortal Ling Shu's office. Only now did he fully understand what his father's death meant to him. Come here for a moment. After third young master Shi left, Sword Immortal Ling Shu ordered a man in a suit and leather shoes to come in. Then, he pulled out a large pile of photos from his dimensional space and handed them to this man. When this man saw the contents of these photos, he couldn't help but tremble. His face turned bright red. These photos were all of beautiful young girls whose bodies had been modified to look like animals. Their behavior was also completely similar to that of animals. And in the photos, third young master Shi was smiling in an exceptionally happy and perverted manner. Investigate all of this for me, Sword Immortal Ling Shu said indifferently. Yes. The man replied. Chapter 1145. Third young master Shi had completely given up on Sword Immortal Ling Shu to avenge his father. Under his instructions, dozens of public literati who were proficient in word games, as well as 20 to 30 large media outlets, and 2,000 to 3,000 personal media accounts simultaneously exposed the fact that Jiyu Xuanyuan had murdered an amiable, kind, and benevolent old man. In the descriptions of these articles, Jiyu Xuanyuan was uniformly described as a crazy and sick murderer, while Shi Jueyuan was described as a kind, and broad-minded old man who did everything possible to protect Yuzhang City for the sake of the people. These articles could quickly bring the reader's emotions to Shi Jueyuan's head, thus causing them to explode with endless anger towards the murderer, Jiyu Xuanyuan. This was also the usual routine of the media. For a media person, stirring up the reader's emotions and guiding the reader's standpoint was the most basic skill. If they couldn't even master this skill, then they weren't qualified to be a media person. For a moment, the public on the internet was indignant. They all expressed their anger towards Jiyu Xuanyuan and urged the Sword Commission to act quickly and bring this murderer to justice. However, these emotions only appeared on the internet in the other 7 cities. But in Yuzhang City, there was no market for such emotions. On the contrary, almost all the people of Yuzhang City stood on Jiyu Xuanyuan's side. This was because all the people of Yuzhang City had seen Jiyu Xuanyuan fight to the death for Yuzhang City. Without Jiyu Xuanyuan, they would have been dead long ago. Even if Jiyu Xuanyuan was really a heinous bastard, they would definitely stand on Jiyu Xuanyuan's side. Moreover, for the people of Yuzhang City, everyone had a scale in their hearts. Everyone knew very well what kind of person Shi Jueyuan was. Therefore, very quickly, the people of Yuzhang City spontaneously defended Jiyu Shenyuan on the internet. The way the people of Yuzhang City refuted was not like the media people that third young master Shi had created. Most of them used simple words and videos. The people of Yuzhang City had a variety of ways to refute. In addition to the most basic verbal refutation and live video refutation, there were also animations, ridicule, music, and the like. The most famous of these was probably a video made by an author. At the beginning of the video, it fully showed the situation that Yuzhang City was facing at that time to the audience outside of Yuzhang City. It showed how Yuzhang City was on the verge of collapse, and the lives of 40 million people could be killed by Yuan coup in the blink of an eye. It made the audience's hearts tighten to the extreme. In the middle of the video, the style of the scene changed. Jiyu Shenyuan appeared out of nowhere. Under the editing of this author, he used all kinds of tight, flashing, high-speed changing scenes, and all kinds of divine songs such as drawing swords, drawing guns, and nuclear explosions to make Jiyu Shenyuan's battle look impassioned. Everyone who saw this battle couldn't help but feel their blood boiling. Especially the last part where Jiyu Shenyuan rode on the giant dragon Kangya to fight with Adam. It directly made everyone's blood boil to the extreme, and their heads started to emit smoke. Of course, the author didn't edit the part where Kang Na turned into a loli. Otherwise, the whole scene would be too strange. And at the end of the video, the author even appeared in person and revealed his true face. He didn't hesitate to tell the audience about the real Shi Jueyuan. Under the author's oral narration, the netizens learned that Shi Jueyuan wasn't an ordinary old man, but the head of the Jendi family. At the same time, the author also talked about Shi Jueyuan's craziness, selfishness, power struggle, harm to the people, bullying men and women, and so on. He completely overturned the image of Shi Jueyuan that the media had created. This made the netizens in other cities a little confused. They didn't know who to believe, and who was telling the truth. Later, a video of 300,000 people in Yuzhang City writing a blood letter was uploaded to the internet. These people volunteered to testify for Jiyu Shenyuan, proving that Shi Jueyuan was indeed a bastard. Only then did the trend on the internet gradually turn to the side of Jiyu Shenyuan. Faced with this situation, third young master Shi was naturally terrified. He could only continue to invest more resources and bribe more internet water armies to smear Jiyu Shenyuan's name and protect his father's image. But no matter how many internet water armies there were, how could they compare to the number of Yuzhang City netizens? The two sides fought each other on the internet and launched a huge debate. In half a month, the attention of the people in the 8 major base cities was focused on Jiyu Shenyuan and Shi Jueyuan. In the end, even third young master Shi couldn't stop it even if he wanted to. Finally, the debate was ended by a video released by the official account of Yuzhang City. This video didn't have any third-party narration. It was just a simple edit of some of what happened before Shi Jueyuan's death. This included how Shi Jueyuan persuaded Sword Immortal Ling Shu to retreat, how he brazenly stated that it didn't matter if the 40 million people stayed in the sanctuary, as long as they could protect the swordsman, and how Shi Jueyuan coveted the treasures of the Sword Pavilion in Yuzhang City. After using despicable means to send Yuzhang City's Sword Pavilion Lord Lu Shihua away, how he wanted to devour the Sword Maiden in the Sword Pavilion. Finally, it was the scene before Shi Jueyuan's death. It was the conversation between Jiyu Shenyuan, Shi Jueyuan, and Sword Immortal Ling Shu in the Sword Pavilion, as well as the scene of Jiyu Shenyuan killing Shi Jueyuan in the end. This video was shot from Sword Immortal Ling Shu's point of view. Clearly, it was automatically recorded by Sword Immortal Ling Shu with his personal terminal. The person who released this video was undoubtedly Sword Immortal Ling Shu himself. Therefore, there was no reason to doubt the authenticity of this video. In this video, all the netizens thoroughly recognized Shi Jueyuan's true colors and knew what kind of a bastard Shi Jueyuan was. The debate on the internet ended in an instant, and the third young master Shi's internet water army was defeated in an instant. Even many of the internet water army themselves jumped on the bandwagon and pretended to be innocent and deceived, condemning Shi Jueyuan along with others. At this point, Shi Jueyuan and the Shi family's reputation became a pile of garbage. It became unbearably stinky. Even the Shi family's former friends couldn't wait to cut ties with the Shi family. The Shi family, one of the largest emperor sword families in Yuzhang City, was instantly weakened. If it wasn't for the fact that the Shi family still had some foundation, they might not even be able to compare to the Yi family. Third young master Shi reaped what he sowed. If he didn't want to start a war on the internet to clear his father's name, all the netizens in Yuzhang City wouldn't have fought with him. In the end, even sword immortal Ling Shu couldn't stand it anymore and took the initiative to stand on Jiyu Shenyuan's side, posting crucial evidence. However, the debate didn't end with the complete defeat of the Shi family's internet water army. The sharp-eyed netizens extracted two pieces of information that interested them. Firstly, this Jiyu Shenyuan was the former pavilion master of Yuzhang City, the guardian of the Sun-Moon Star in Shanhai Pass, and one of the three great heroes. She had stripped off the clothes of the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor's son, and was now the elder sister of the famous sword-rank sword wielder Jiyu Han, a wanted criminal. Oh right, now that Jiyu Shenyuan had also become a wanted criminal, these two siblings were in the same boat. Second, Jiyu Shenyuan's beauty. Thanks to the wonderful things that the video creator had done, Jiyu Shenyuan's peerless beauty instantly attracted a large number of fans all over the world. All kinds of Jiyu Shenyuan's fan clubs, QQ groups, and fan alliances sprang up overnight. It was said that someone in Yuzhang City even created a goddess Shenyuan sect, connecting Jiyu Shenyuan with the sun. They called Jiyu Shenyuan the sun goddess and worshipped Jiyu Shenyuan's portrait every day. As a result, a few months later, Jiyu Shenyuan suddenly emerged as a new force in the world's largest selection of the world's most beautiful goddess on the internet. With her well-deserved crushing strength, she completely crushed all the popular celebrities and was elected as the world's most beautiful woman. Of course, there were also some things that might make Guhan unhappy. Many manufacturers began to privately produce and sell Jiyu Shenyuan's albums, Jiyu Shenyuan's drawings, Jiyu Shenyuan's beautiful pictures, shirts with Jiyu Shenyuan's pictures printed on them, Jiyu Shenyuan's special figurines, the artist's upper body, with its own Opie mouse pad, Jiyu Shenyuan's full color book, and finally, Jiyu Shenyuan's inflatable dolls. That's right, in some romantic action movies, some women who looked similar to Jiyu Shenyuan were specially invited to dress up like Jiyu Shenyuan. Then, they got a legal loli to play the role of Kang Na, and sent out an indescribable short movie. In any case, a wave of Jiyu Shenyuan's economy instantly flourished on the internet, lasting for a long time. It was not until after Guhan ascended to the throne that he specially launched an anti-pornography campaign, sweeping away all the illegal products related to Jiyu Shenyuan, that this damned Jiyu Shenyuan's economy was barely curbed. Of course, this was all in the future. Right now, Jiyu Shenyuan was completely unaware of this. She was currently chasing after Mu Shui and Lu Shihua, trying to save her disciple. At this time, it had already been 5 days since Mu Shui and Lu Shihua set out. If they maintained their top speed, Mu Shui and Lu Shihua should have already left the borders of Huaxia and arrived at the Middle East region, which was near Lengthen City. However, before leaving Yuzhang City, Jiyu Shenyuan had asked sword immortal Ling Shu to contact Mu Shui's sword spirit, and discovered that she was still in a region where the signal could not reach. This meant that Mu Shui's sword spirit had not yet passed through the signal isolation zone. At this time, she should be in the Xinjiang region of ancient Yanghuang, the ancient Pakistan region, the ancient Afghanistan region, and the ancient Iran region. Even though he had already ascertained the location of Mu Shui and the sword spirit, this region was simply too big. It was so big that even Jiyu Shenyuan could not make heads or tails of it. He could only follow the path that they would most likely take. I hope nothing happens to Shihua. Jiyu Shenyuan prayed in her heart. Chapter 1146. Because the flying droplet was running out of energy, Jiyu Shenyuan had no choice but to purchase a Yang Huang 3008 from Yuzhang City as his ride. He turned on the flying droplet and sped through the forest at an unimaginable speed. Very quickly, he arrived at the outermost area of Yuzhang City's signal coverage. This was also the last place Mu Shui and Lu Shihua had contacted Yuzhang City. Mu Shui, the sword spirit, and Lu Shihua had taken 4 days to arrive, but Jiyu Shenyuan had only taken 1 day. This showed how fast Jiyu Shenyuan was. Moreover, this was under the situation where Jiyu Shenyuan could only use one hand to drive and the other hand could not be used because he was holding the Zhuxian sword. However, there were many Yuan Ku in this area, and it was definitely not a suitable place to stay. Most sword bearers would choose to travel another 200 to 300 kilometers to Lanzhou City. After reaching Lanzhou City, they would use the ruins of Lanzhou City to set up camp and spend the night before continuing. The ruins of Lanzhou City are up ahead. There are 3 routes from Lanzhou City to London City. I wonder which route Lu Shihua and the rest took. Jiyu Shenyuan kept the Yang Huang 3008 in her dimensional pocket and looked at the vast and endless desert, muttering to herself in distress. 1,000 years later, unlike the world in the south that was completely occupied by all kinds of forests and trees, this was a world drowned in yellow sand from ancient Shaanxi province. The spread of desertification had never stopped, drowning the world that was originally full of life 1,000 years ago. Starting from Yangon City in the northwest of ancient Shaanxi province, there was an astonishing stretch of yellow sand as far as the eye could see. This desert spread all the way to the Mediterranean Sea before it stopped. This was the largest desert on Earth 1,000 years later, spanning the entire Eurasian continent and occupying almost 1/5 of Asia. Lu Shihua and the rest signal had disappeared in Lanzhou City 3 days ago, which also meant that Lu Shihua and the rest had indeed reached Lanzhou City 3 days ago. Therefore, Jiyu Shenyuan could only hope to find some clues in the ruins of Lanzhou City and find the direction Lu Shihua and the rest had gone. It was not difficult to find clues about Lu Shihua and the rest. Jiyu Shenyuan drove the Yang Huang 3008 around all the suitable places to set up camp in Lanzhou City, and found traces of people living in the ruins of a building that was leeward from the wind. There is a lot of food residue on the ground. Judging from the degree of decay, it should have been eaten 2 or 3 days ago. Jiyu Shenyuan analyzed the remaining bones on the ground, as well as things like fruit pits and the like, and made a judgment. These 2 places should be where they set up their tents. Since there are only 2 traces of tents, there should only be 2 people staying here, which is the same number as Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit. Why do I smell blood? Jiyu Xuanyuan's nose suddenly wafted a bit of the smell of blood. Smelling these scents, Jiyu Xuanyuan's heart tightened. Could it be that the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua were attacked here? There was a battle, and there were casualties. Without saying a word, Jiyu Shenyuan immediately followed the smell of blood. In the end, in the corner of the building ruins, she found 2 dark red pieces of thick cloth that looked like the flag of a certain country. Jiyu Xuanyuan's expression suddenly turned awkward. The smell of blood that she smelled actually came from the sanitary napkin. Looks like it can't be wrong. This is where the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua were camping. Although this discovery was awkward, it did have an important meaning. This meant that the 2 people who stayed here were both female, and for 2 female sword bearers to form a team, other than Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit, there was no other possibility. Jiyu Shenyuan could officially confirm that the people who had set up camp here were the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua. I need to search this place carefully, and see if there are any clues that can confirm the next step of the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua. Jiyu Shenyuan thought to herself, and began to search the entire building ruins inside and out. In the end, Jiyu Shenyuan was very disappointed. In the entire building ruins, Jiyu Shenyuan did not find any useful clues. This building ruins still had 5 floors, but other than some footprints on the 2nd floor, there were no signs of anyone entering the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. Clearly, the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua had only moved around the 1st and 2nd floors. On the 2nd floor, there were very few traces of activity, only the 2nd floor's window had more footprints. It seemed like the 2 of them had checked the 2nd floor's window, and confirmed that the surroundings were safe. Although there were many traces of activity on the 1st floor, they were all traces of daily life. There were no books, maps, notes, or other possible clues, which made Jiyu Shenyuan very disappointed. Just when Jiyu Shenyuan was about to give up, a strange trace suddenly entered Jiyu Xuanyuan's eyes. Jiyu Shenyuan noticed that this was a trace of food residue, some yellow, fine, unknown food residue. This is. Jiyu Shenyuan squatted on the ground and hesitated for a moment. Then, she picked up the largest residue, blew the dust off it, and placed it in her mouth to chew. Finally, she confirmed, it's actually the residue of instant noodles. Logically speaking, there was nothing strange about this. Even after 1,000 years, instant noodles were still a favorite travel food of every sword wielder. Almost every sword wielder would have some instant noodles stored in their dimensional pockets, so it was very normal for there to be instant noodle residue left behind. However, such a normal thing became abnormal in the eyes of Jiyu Shenyuan. The residue of the instant noodles was not the residue of the instant noodles that had been soaked in water, but the residue of the instant noodles that had been directly eaten. Everyone must have eaten dry instant noodles before, and they also knew that when eating dry instant noodles, there would inevitably be some fine residue falling from the mouth, just like the instant noodles residue that appeared in front of Jiyu Shenyuan at this time. Jiyu Shenyuan had lived with Lu Shihua for a month, so she had some understanding of Lu Shihua's small habits. Jiyu Shenyuan clearly knew that Lu Shihua's character was very conservative, and she also abided by the rules. The biggest manifestation of this character was that when Lu Shihua walked, she would definitely walk on the sidewalk, and would not even cross the edge of the sidewalk. When she slept, she would definitely sleep from the head of the bed to the end, and would never lie on the bed. When she ate, she would definitely eat on the dining table, and not lying on the bed. When she ate, she would definitely use soaked instant noodles, and would never eat dry instant noodles. In short, Lu Shihua liked and would definitely abide by these conventional rules. Unless there was an external force that forced her, she would never break this rule. Therefore, Jiyu Shenyuan was very sure that Lu Shihua must have encountered a situation where she had no choice but to break her usual rules to eat dry instant noodles. Right, it was also because of this character of Lu Shihua that Jiyu Shenyuan was sure that these instant noodles were eaten by Lu Shihua. Because these instant noodles residues appeared about a meter away from the traces of a tent, it was obvious that at that time, Lu Shihua sat at the entrance of her own tent and gnawed on these instant noodles. At the same time, a lot of food residues appeared in the traces of another tent, which meant that at that time, someone was sitting inside the tent and eating. This was something that Lu Shihua would never do. Lu Shihua would never eat inside the tent, because according to her usual principles, the tent was a place to sleep, and not a place to eat. Going back to the question just now, what kind of situation happened that forced Lu Shihua to break her usual rules, but what about the instant noodles that she had never eaten dry? Could it be? A light flashed in Jiyu Shenyuan's eyes. She once again searched through all the food residues, and shockingly found that all the food residues were cooked food. They were food that had already been cooked, and could be eaten directly. There was nothing that needed to be cooked before being used. What did this mean? This meant that a very key problem was that Lu Shihua and the others had lost the ability to cook, or rather, the ability to boil water. Jiyu Shenyuan found a lot of traces of flames in the ruins before, which meant that Lu Shihua and the others did not lack the ability to start a fire. Then there was only one reason left. Lu Shihua and the others had lost water, and there was no edible water. This forced Lu Shihua and the others to eat some directly edible cooked food, forcing Lu Shihua to eat only instant noodles. This was a very surprising fact to Jiyu Shenyuan. For a sword bearer with a dimensional pocket, losing water was a very inconceivable thing. The huge space in the dimensional pocket could allow them to store more than a year's worth of edible water. Even if they wanted to take a bath, the stored water would be enough for them to bathe every day for a month. At this time, it was less than a week since Lu Shihua and the others left Yuzhang City. How could the water in their dimensional pocket disappear now? The dimensional pocket was the safest place in the world. Even if there was a force 12 gale outside, the water in the dimensional pocket would not be lost. Even if they were besieged by Yuan Ku, the water in the dimensional pocket would not be lost. Unless Lu Shihua and the others were stupid and took out all the water in the dimensional pocket to pour out, Jiyu Shenyuan could not think of any reason for Lu Shihua and the others to lose all their water. Unless there is a reason. Jiyu Shenyuan suddenly had an extremely bad thought in her heart. That is, Lu Shihua and the others not only lost their water, but also their dimensional pocket. Where is the nearest water source nearby? Without saying anything, Jiyu Shenyuan immediately took out a map from her dimensional pocket and began to search for all the places near Lanju City that could provide water. Before recovering Guhan's body, Jiyu Shenyuan did not dare to go to the personal terminal management office to repair her personal terminal, because this meant that the fact that Jiyu Shenyuan and Guhan were the same person would be exposed. Therefore, Jiyu Shenyuan did not have a personal terminal on her, and could not use the convenient map system of the personal terminal. She could only use these old-fashioned maps. Found it. Jiyu Shenyuan quickly confirmed the location of the nearest water source to Lanju City. If Jiyu Xuanyuan's estimation was not wrong, then Lu Shihua and the rest who had lost their water source would definitely come to this place, and store enough water for them to use. Chapter 1147. 1,000 years ago, Gulan City had an inexhaustible source of water. That was the Yellow River, the mother river of Yanghuang. Gulan City was built on the Yellow River. However, with the changes of the times and the continuous advance of desertification, the Yellow River had changed its course 20 to 30 times. The nearest channel of the Yellow River was 300 kilometers away from Gulan City. Since Hua Tsubing built a stronghold 3,000 years ago, Gulan City had been inextricably linked to the Yellow River. 3,000 years later, it had completely lost contact with the Yellow River. It had to be said that this was a very ironic thing. After the large-scale desertification and the loss of irrigation from the Yellow River, the water sources around Gulan City became extremely scarce. The map in Jiyu Xuanyuan's hands was drawn 10 years ago. According to the information from 10 years ago, there were 24 large and small water sources within 200 kilometers of Gulan City. These were the traditional oases. However, the desert was ever-changing. There had never been an oasis that had existed for more than 50 years. Therefore, this map drawn 10 years ago might not be accurate. Among the 24 oases, it was estimated that at least 7 or 8 oases had disappeared and were replaced by new oases. Therefore, Jiyu Shenyuan was not sure that the oasis she was heading to next was still at the location shown on the map. The only thing worth rejoicing about was that Jiyu Shenyuan did not know about the changes in these oases. Lu Shihua and the others also did not know about the changes in these oases. Therefore, they would definitely do the same as Jiyu Shenyuan and follow the path closest to the oases. The oasis closest to Gulan City was named Bank Oasis. The reason for this name was because this oasis used to be the ruins of a China Credit Union 24-hour self-help bank by the Yellow River. Later on, this place gradually became an oasis. Therefore, it was simply and crudely named Bank Oasis by sword-bearers who passed by. When Jiyu Shenyuan arrived at this Bank Oasis, she found that it was just as she had feared. This oasis had lost its greenery and water source. It had once again become a desert. Only a few withered old trees seemed to be crying to passers-by about how beautiful this place used to be. There is food residue here. However, Jiyu Shenyuan was not completely oblivious. She found some food residue near an old tree. Obviously, someone had eaten a meal here while leaning against the old tree. Without a doubt, the two people eating were Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit. This once again aroused Jiyu Shenyuan's deep suspicions and worries. This bank oasis was roughly 30 kilometers away from Lu Shihua and the rest's campsite. According to common sense, after Lu Shihua and the others finished their breakfast, they set off from the ruins early in the morning. If they had driven a maglev flying car here, it would have taken them less than half an hour to travel the 30 kilometers. When they found out that the bank oasis had disappeared, they would inevitably look for the next possible oasis. In any case, they would not waste 3 to 4 hours in this bank oasis. They would wait until it was lunchtime to have lunch here. There was only one reason for this, and that was that Lu Shihua and the others had lost their maglev flying car and could only rely on their own feet to reach the bank oasis. Looking at it this way, 30 kilometers was exactly a 3 to 4 hour journey for the sword-bearers, and it would be lunchtime when they arrived at the bank oasis. This situation even more clearly confirmed Jiyu Xuanyuan's previous guess. Lu Shihua and the others had lost their dimensional pockets, and at the same time, they had also lost the maglev flying car stored in the dimensional pocket. It's only been 2 to 3 days since they ate here. If Lu Shihua and the others lost their maglev flying car, they definitely won't be able to travel too far and can only move between the nearby oases. It stood to reason that after understanding this, Jiyu Shenyuan should be very happy. This meant that Jiyu Shenyuan only needed to explore all the surrounding oases to have a high chance of finding Lu Shihua and the others. However, there was a precondition. The precondition was that Lu Shihua and the others were lucky enough to not encounter a powerful meteor rank Yuan bandit. Otherwise, if they lost the hovercraft that could allow them to escape, it would be a huge question mark whether they could even survive around Lan province. As a result, Jiyu Xuanyuan's original plan was completely changed. Originally, Jiyu Shenyuan planned to chase along the road and find Lu Shihua and the others in Xinjiang. But now this plan had completely changed. Jiyu Shenyuan needed to carry out a large-scale search around Lanzhou. Things in this world were really unpredictable. Thinking of this, Jiyu Shenyuan once again sped up her pace and quickly headed to other oases, wanting to find traces of Lu Shihua and the others. However, the heavens seemed to intentionally increase the difficulty of Jiyu Xuanyuan's mission. Jiyu Shenyuan searched for a total of 10 oases along the way, but these 10 oases had all dried up and turned back into deserts. Jiyu Xuanyuan's search was also fruitless. Finally, when Jiyu Shenyuan found the 11th oasis, a touch of green finally appeared in front of Jiyu Shenyuan. This oasis did not dry up like the previous 10 oases. It still maintained its original appearance. There was a small pool of water with an area of about 1 hectare, and there were some trees growing nearby. It was a rare piece of green in the desert. Life detector, activate. Jiyu Shenyuan did not say anything and immediately took out a life detector from her dimensional pocket. This was a life detector that Jiyu Shenyuan had specially asked Sword Immortal Ling Shu for in order to find the location of Lu Shihua and the others. All traces of life within its detection range could be detected by this life detector. It was a pity that this detection range was still a little too short. According to the range of life within a diameter of 10 kilometers, there would be no response beyond this range. If this detection range could be 100 kilometers, then Jiyu Xuanyuan's work would probably be much easier. She would only need to quickly make a few rounds around Liao City and she would be able to find Lu Shihua and the others. What Jiyu Shenyuan did not expect was that the moment she took out the life detector, a pleasant surprise occurred. The life detector began to emit a low and urgent beeping sound. This meant that the life detector had already found a living life nearby. However, this life signal was very weak, and there was the threat of death at any time. Could it be Lu Shihua and the others? Jiyu Shenyuan did not say anything and directly sprinted in the direction indicated by the life detector. In the end, she discovered a person lying face down on the shore of the pool. Most of his body was submerged in the pool, and only his head was exposed. It's not Lu Shihua. After seeing the head clearly, Jiyu Shenyuan sank into disappointment. This person had short hair. Whether it was Lu Shihua or Mu Shui's sword spirit, they both had long hair. If she was not mistaken, this person was not Lu Shihua. Although she was very disappointed, Jiyu Shenyuan still sprinted towards this person and prepared to save him from the water. After all, this was a human life. Jiyu Shenyuan could not just leave him in the lurch. It's actually him. She had to admit that fate was truly full of surprises. When Jiyu Shenyuan pulled this person out of the water and flipped him over, she was shocked to find that this person was actually a familiar face. He was the only descendant of Zhetian Jendi who fought with her in Changyang Mountain, the last descendant of the Yi clan, Yi Wenjun. How could it be him? Jiyu Shenyuan did not expect to meet Yi Wenjun here at all. More than 3 years ago, after Yi Wenjun provided Guhan with the evidence that allowed Guhan to turn the tables, Guhan did not have much contact with Yi Wenjun other than having a meal with him. This was because not long after that, Guhan went to Yangjing City to participate in the 8th Academy Assembly, then went straight to Shanhai Pass. He stayed in Shanhai Pass for 3 years, and did not see Yi Wenjun in Yuzhang City. If she had not suddenly seen Yi Wenjun, Jiyu Shenyuan would have almost forgotten about this person. I don't know why he's unconscious. Jiyu Shenyuan placed Yi Wenjun into the medical pod. The medical pod activated its automatic examination program, and after a series of scans, the examination report was displayed on the screen. The patient's body is very healthy, but because he has not eaten for a long time, his vital signs are weak. He only needs to inject a certain amount of glucose to alleviate the symptoms. However, there is a magical energy that belongs to Yuan Ku in the patient's brain, suppressing his central nervous system, so he is in a coma. The medical pod does not have the ability to treat this, and only by removing the magical energy in the patient's brain can the patient wake up. As expected, he became like this because he was attacked by Yuan Ku. The medical pod's diagnosis was very clear: he had fallen into a coma after being attacked by Yuan Ku's magic. This was a problem that the medical pod could not solve, and Jiyu Shenyuan could only find a way to remove the magical energy in Yi Wenjun's brain to wake him up. But here came the problem: ordinary sword maidens did not have the ability to remove magical energy, and only a few Confucian or martial sword maidens who had the ability to purify could use their own skills to treat Yi Wenjun. Obviously, Jiyu Shenyuan did not have such a sword maiden. Forget it. I'll put him in the hovercraft first, and we'll talk about it after we find Lu Shihua and the others. Just as Jiyu Shenyuan was about to temporarily give up on treating Yi Wenjun, a familiar voice rang in Jiyu Xuanyuan's ear. I say, Guhan, why are you so stupid? There's a ready-made sword maiden here, and you actually don't have the ability to remove any magical energy. This was the Shenyuan sword's voice, and the sword empress began to cry out in surprise again. Lady Shenyuan sword, you mean to say that you have a way to treat Yi Wenjun? Jiyu Shenyuan said with some surprise. It's not that I have a way, it's the immortal slaying sword in your hand, the Shenyuan sword said proudly. Your immortal slaying sword is a carnate treasure that can even kill deities. You only need to put a bit of immortal slaying sword chi into his nostrils, and all magical energy will immediately disperse. The moment they touch the immortal slaying sword chi, they will melt like snow. Who asked the difference in innate levels to be so great? Hearing the Shenyuan sword's words, Jiyu Shenyuan placed the tip of the immortal slaying sword at Yi Wenjun's nostrils, and then slightly stimulated a bit of sword chi that resembled green smoke into Yi Wenjun's brain. Not long later, just as the Shenyuan sword said, Yi Wenjun's eyelids moved, and he slowly opened his eyes. Chapter 1148. You are. Yi Wenjun opened her eyes and found that a beautiful woman had appeared in front of her. Although it was the first time they met, Yi Wenjun had a vague feeling that he seemed to have met this beauty somewhere before. I'm Jiyu Shenyuan. Jiyu Shenyuan pulled Yi Wenjun out of the medical pod, then narrowed her eyes and said, I know you, you're Yi Wenjun, my brother's friend. I'm your brother's friend? Yi Wenjun was stunned for a moment, then thought of Jiyu Xuanyuan's rare surname, and this familiar face, and immediately reacted, you must be Lord Guhan's sister. You're not that stupid. Jiyu Shenyuan stood up. Tell me, why did you faint in the pool? It was a Yuan bandit, a white-robed Yuan bandit. Yi Wenjun's face suddenly revealed an expression of incomparable terror. Me, Pavilion Master Lu Shihua, and Sword Spirit Mu Shui were attacked by a white-robed Yuan bandit. Mu Shui's Sword Spirit risked her life to block that white Yuan Ku, and I ran in a panic. I don't know how long I ran for, but I ran into a pool, and when I was stimulated by the cold water, I fainted. Yi Wenjun panted heavily as she spoke, as if she was still immersed in endless fear. What did you say? You met Lu Shihua and Mu Shui Sword Spirit. Jiyu Shenyuan never expected that she would get such an important clue from Yi Wenjun. Yes. We were looking for a water source together, and when we finally found one, we met with such a thing. Yi Wenjun said in a low voice. Slow down a little. What happened? How did you meet Lu Shihua and Mu Shui Sword Spirit? Jiyu Shenyuan tried her best to speak calmly. It's like this. Yi Wenjun slowly told her story. Ever since Yi Wenjun helped Guhan 3 years ago, she felt that she was too weak to revive the Yi family, so she decided to go out and train herself, using bloody battles to make herself stronger. As such, Yi Wenjun had been with the swordbearers for the past 3 years, completing all sorts of missions and killing all sorts of Yuan Ku. His strength had indeed increased, and he was now a sword-rank swordbearer. 2 months ago, Yi Wenjun had joined a team of 20 swordbearers. Their mission was to explore a dimensional crystal mine. This mine was discovered by a team of swordbearers a year ago. It was said that the mine was very rich, more than 10 times richer than the mine in the Plum Ridge mountain range. It was the richest mine that humans had ever discovered, and it was very useful to humans. However, the team that had discovered the mine was too small in number, and their strength was also very weak. They also did not have any special equipment, so they could not fully explore the mine. Therefore, they could only return to Yuzhang City immediately and ask Yuzhang City to organize a strong team to explore the mine. This exploration team was led by 2 spirit sword level swordbearers, and the rest were all famed sword level swordbearers. It could be said that this was one of the strongest swordbearer teams that Yuzhang City could send out. According to the coordinates left by the team that had first discovered the mine, it was confirmed that the mine should be at the location of the Lujiaxia Reservoir before the Great Apocalypse. After some exploration and fighting, the team finally arrived at the Lujiaxia Reservoir. As expected, they found an extremely rich mine. Not only was it 10 times richer than the Plum Ridge mountain range, but it was also 5 times bigger than the Plum Ridge mountain range. The two multiplied to a difference of 50 times, which was enough for Yuzhang City to consume for 10,000 years. After confirming the location and content of the mine, the team prepared to return to Yuzhang City. However, Yi Wenjun and the other 4 famed sword-level swordbearers left the team and stayed behind. They felt that it would be a waste to rush back to the ancient Gansu province after going through so much trouble. It would be better to stay and explore and broaden their horizons. As a result, Yi Wenjun and the 4 famed sword-level friends wandered around the area for 2 months. When they felt that their adventure was almost over and were ready to return to Yuzhang City, they met the white-clothed Yuan Ku. Yi Wenjun and the others fought with the white-clothed Yuan Ku, but they found that they were no match for him. The 4 famed sword-level swordbearers all died at the hands of the white-clothed Yuan Ku. Yi Wenjun's sword mistress was also broken. She no longer had the ability to fight with the white-clothed Yuan Ku. Just as Yi Wenjun was about to close her eyes and wait for death, she coincidentally met the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua, who had come looking for water. The Mu Shui sword spirit did not hesitate to fight with the white-clothed swordsman. Although the Mu Shui sword spirit was 1 rank higher than the famed sword-level swordbearers, her strength was still very weak in front of the white-clothed Yuan Ku. The Mu Shui sword spirit quickly fell into a disadvantageous position, and her personal shield was also in danger. At this critical moment, the Mu Shui sword spirit let Yi Wenjun and Lu Shihua escape separately, while she sacrificed herself to stall the white-clothed Yuan Ku. Yi Wenjun had long been scared out of her wits by the white-clothed Yuan Ku. She did not have the courage to resist and could only run for her life. In the end, she fainted in the pool. That means the Mu Shui sword spirit and Lu Shihua are in a very dangerous situation right now. After listening to Yi Wenjun's narration, Jiyu Shenyuan clenched his fists and immediately took out his own super hovercraft. Without any explanation, he pulled Yi Wenjun into the car, and under Yi Wenjun's command, they sped towards the location of the battle. Actually, the location of the battle wasn't too far away. It was only about 20 kilometers away from this oasis. After all, Yi Wenjun had run all the way here, and his pair of legs could not run that far. Only 10 minutes later, Jiyu Shenyuan arrived at the location of the battle. There was indeed an intense battle taking place here. Countless crisscrossing sword scars had appeared on the flat desert. The shortest of these sword scars was 10 meters long and 1 meter deep, while the longest was more than 500 meters long and 10 meters deep. Many of the sand in the sword scars had already become charred black. Some of the sand had even turned into glass, becoming the most primitive form of glass. From this, it could be seen how intense the battle had been. The one fighting here is most likely a peerless swordsman. Seeing these wanton crisscrossing sword scars, Jiyu Xuanyuan's mind couldn't help but think of scenes of intense battles. The core of these scenes was the image of a person wielding a long sword, constantly slashing out powerful sword chi. Miss Jiyu Shenyuan, let's split up and search. Let's see if we can find any clues about the Mu Shui sword spirit, Yi Wenjun suggested to Jiyu Shenyuan. All right. Jiyu Shenyuan nodded. The two of them went in two different directions to search the entire battlefield. In the end, not long after, Yi Wenjun found an extremely important clue at the edge of the battlefield. Miss Jiyu Shenyuan, look. This is the sword lady of Lord Mu Shui sword spirit. Yi Wenjun's face was filled with grief as she dragged some incomplete fragments in her hands. These were fragments left behind after a sword was broken. It would be very difficult for a normal person to recognize the original appearance of this sword from these fragments, but Jiyu Shenyuan, who was familiar with every spirit sword grade sword lady, immediately recognized that these fragments came from a spirit sword grade sword lady called the Black Tortoise sword. This was because it was said that this sword was forged from the turtle shell of one of the four sacred beasts, the Black Tortoise of the North. Speaking of which, Jiyu Shenyuan wasn't unfamiliar with the Black Tortoise. When Jiyu Shenyuan was the Taiyin Star Garrison, the Black Tortoise Garrison was an extremely important garrison area under Taiyin Star Garrison. At the same time, Jiyu Shenyuan was very clear that Mu Shui sword spirit sword lady was this Black Tortoise sword. Luckily, Mu Shui sword spirit sword lady was man-made. Otherwise, if the real Black Tortoise sword was broken here, then Yuzhong City's loss would be too great. Looks like Mu Shui sword spirit really did have a great battle here. Jiyu Shenyuan looked at the remains of the Black Tortoise sword and sighed in her heart. Although Mu Shui sword spirit's standpoint was different from hers, and she had also done many things that made her extremely disgusted. But after all, they were both sword bearers of Yuzhong City, so Jiyu Shenyuan couldn't help but feel a little sad in her heart. After putting the broken Black Tortoise sword into the dimensional pocket, Jiyu Shenyuan and Yi Wenjun quickly found some other relics. These were all Mu Shui sword spirits and Lu Shihua's belongings. There was also Yi Wenjun's own belongings. Yi Wenjun found the remains of her famous sword grade sword lady's broken sword, and hugged the remains as she cried. After all, for every sword bearer, the sword lady was their lifeblood. The sword maiden was their lifeblood. Now that their lifeblood was gone, every sword wielder would be grief-stricken. What's a man crying for? Right now, the most important thing is to find that Lu Shihua and the others. I discovered that although there are many of their relics nearby, I still haven't found their corpses, not even a piece of minced meat. I suspect that Lu Shihua and the others didn't die, but were captured by Yuan Ku. Right now, our top priority is to find them, but in this vast desert, besides these unconcealable sword marks, there aren't any other footprints. Where are we going to find traces of Pavilion Master Lu Shihua and the others? Yi Wenjun knelt on the ground and said in a daze. Wait for him to come find me. Jiyu Shenyuan said something that made Yi Wenjun feel incomparably flabbergasted. What was this? Why would he, Jiyu Shenyuan, let that white-robed Yuan Ku come find him? Just when Yi Wenjun was feeling puzzled, Jiyu Shenyuan suddenly slowly floated up. Facing the sun high up in the sky, he calmed his mind for a moment, then suddenly a sword chi slashed out from the execution immortal sword in Jiyu Shenyuan's hand. In the next second, Yi Wenjun's pupils constricted. Because the target of Jiyu Shenyuan's sword chi wasn't anything else, but the sun suspended in the sky. The moment the sword chi slashed out, the sun in Yi Wenjun's eyes actually broke into two halves. Yes, that's right, the sun in the sky was cut into two halves by Jiyu Shenyuan's sword chi. Chapter 1149. In fact, it was not just Yi Wenjun. The entire Yanghuang territory, including Yangjing City and Yuzhong City, saw the sun suddenly split in half. But this magical scene was fleeting. When these witnesses rubbed their eyes to get a clearer look, the sun returned to its original state, and there was no other abnormality. So 99% of the humans who saw this scene thought they were seeing things and did not take it to heart. As for the remaining 1% of humans who firmly believed that they saw the sun split in half, their words were just gossip and did not attract anyone's attention. The whole thing was not shocking in reality or on the internet, and no one discussed it. But this was only for ordinary people. Among the top sword bearers and Yuan Ku, there were also many powerful beings who saw this magical scene. They were not like ordinary humans who thought that there was something wrong with their eyes. They knew clearly that at that moment, the sun was indeed split in half. In this regard, All of the powerful beings felt a bit of terror in their hearts. To be able to split the sun with a single sword strike, how terrifying must one's strength be to achieve such a feat? Could it be that another terrifying sword wielder or Yuenko had been born in this world? Miss Jiyu Shenyuan, did you really split the sun just now? When everything calmed down, Yi Wenjun walked to Jiyu Xuanyuan's side, trembling, and asked with a tone of horror. He suddenly realized that he did not understand this sister of Lord Guhan. This sister seemed to be more powerful and terrifying than Guhan. How is that possible? If I can split the sun with a sword, then there will be no Yuan Ku left alive on this earth. Jiyu Shenyuan shook her head. This is just a little trick. Really? A little trick like light and shadow magic? Yi Wenjun suddenly remembered that she had seen some ordinary people perform very magical magic on TV, such as a coin falling under the table through a cup, or a person being cut in half, but the two bodies were still alive and kicking, and so on. Could it be that what Jiyu Shenyuan showed just now was also a kind of magic, using some changes in light and shadow to create the illusion of the sun being split in half? Light and shadow? Jiyu Shenyuan pondered over these two words, nodded and said, more or less. In a way, it's the same. I see. I see. Yi Wenjun felt that her broken common sense had recovered quite a bit. As long as everything was still within the scope of her common sense understanding, it was fine. However, Yi Wenjun still could not understand why Jiyu Shenyuan would do this. Did she think that by splitting the sun, she would be able to lure the white-clothed Yuan Ku to appear? Yi Wenjun felt that this was an impossible thing, but very quickly, Yi Wenjun was slapped in the face. After a while, a white figure gradually appeared at the edge of his vision. The figure grew larger and closer. Yi Wenjun was clearly 4 to 5 kilometers away from the edge of her field of vision, and the white-clothed figure was only walking at an ordinary pace. However, in just a short span of 20 to 30 seconds, the white-clothed figure had reached a distance of less than 200 meters from Yi Wenjun. His entire figure and appearance were clearly visible. It's him. It was him. Is that white-clothed Yuan Ku? Yi Wenjun let out a scream of horror. Then, he quickly hid behind Jiyu Shenyuan. His entire body was trembling. It seemed that he had developed a deep fear towards this white-clothed Yuan Ku. Stand up. Seeing Yi Wenjun become like this, Jiyu Xuanyuan's heart gave birth to some unhappiness. This was Yi Qing's only descendant, how could she be so unbearable? Seeing a Yuan Ku and she was already this scared. How could she continue the bloodline of Zhetian Zhendi in the future? Jiyu Shenyuan did not waste any words. She directly slapped Yi Wenjun's face. After letting out a crisp and sweet sound, she expressionlessly asked Yi Wenjun, "Does it hurt?" "It hurts." Yi Wenjun touched his own face. He looked at Jiyu Shenyuan in confusion. "Is there still fear in your heart?" Jiyu Shenyuan asked again. "It seems to be a bit lighter." Yi Wenjun had not finished speaking when Jiyu Shenyuan slapped Yi Wenjun's face again. This time, she used more force than before. The sound was also louder. The pain was also more severe. The fear in Yi Wenjun's heart was also replaced by this severe pain. "Stand properly. Don't lose the face of Zhetian Zhendi," Jiyu Shenyuan lightly said. Yi Wenjun finally understood the reason why Jiyu Shenyuan slapped him. It turned out that Jiyu Shenyuan planned to use pain and humiliation to replace the fear in Yi Wenjun's heart. Although this method was violent and painful, one had to admit that it was a very effective method. At least, Yi Wenjun was no longer trembling in fear. Desolate wind and sand for thousands of miles. Half of the smoke and dust rolled up the round sun. This white-clothed Yuan Ku was also interesting. The moment he saw Jiyu Shenyuan, he first chanted a poem. Then, he said with a warm smile, "In this sandstorm, I did not expect to see such a beautiful woman. Bai is really lucky. Is it him?" Jiyu Shenyuan ignored this white-clothed Yuan Ku's teasing. Instead, she turned her head and asked Yi Wenjun behind her. "It's him." Yi Wenjun nodded her head. "It's him. I would recognize him even if he turned into ashes." Jiyu Shenyuan swept a few glances at this white-clothed Yuan Ku. She discovered that the other party was around 30 or 40 years old. From the outline of his face, it could be seen that this white-clothed Yuan Ku must have been an extremely handsome person when he was young. But at the age of 40, his face was already covered with wrinkles left behind by time. It was as if they were carved by a knife. To be able to have wrinkles like this at the age of 40, he must have lived an extraordinary life. His life must have been full of ups and downs. This could also be seen from his clothes. This white-clothed Yuan Ku was called white-clothed Yuan Ku. Naturally, he wore white clothes. Moreover, it was absolutely white. Even the belt around his waist was white. Judging from the style of the clothes, it was definitely not the overly westernized and casual clothes of the Celestial dynasty. Instead, it was similar to the clothes of the Middle Ages. A long white robe covered her entire body from head to toe. The collar, cuffs, and edges of the robe were pasted to the sides. The front and back of the robe were straight, and the lower edges of the front and back lapels were connected horizontally with a piece of cloth. The waist was tightly fastened with a leather belt, and the sleeves were straight. The entire robe was tightly attached to the body, completely revealing the slender and perfect figure of the person. This seems to be the clothes of the Tang dynasty. Jiyu Shenyuan recalled an ancient painting of the Tang dynasty that she had seen unearthed from a ruin. The people in the ancient painting were dressed exactly the same as the Yuan Ku in front of her. Obviously, this Yuan Ku should be a human from the Tang dynasty. For a person from the Tang dynasty in the Middle Ages, there were two reasons why a person liked to wear white clothes. First, he was born with a preference for white and liked to wear white clothes. Second, this person was extremely poor, so poor that he could only wear white clothes. This was because in the Middle Ages, pigments were very expensive. The value of a gram of pigments was often comparable to the value of a gram of gold. A bolt of white cloth was not worth much. However, once it was dyed with different colors and patterns, this bolt of cloth would become very valuable. Therefore, brightly colored clothes were clothes that only the rich could afford to wear. Ordinary people could only wear clothes made of white or gray cloth. This was because these clothes did not need to be dyed and were the cheapest. In addition to the color, it could be seen that this Yuan Ku was very poor in the other world. There was one more thing that could be proved. That was, his whole set of clothes was very simple. Other than the belt on his waist, there were no other ornaments. While this set of clothes completely revealed the figure of this Yuan Ku, it also showed that there was nothing else inside this set of clothes. This Yuan Ku only had this set of clothes on his entire body. It could be said that this white-clothed Yuan Ku's entire image was very destitute. It was hard to believe that such a destitute person could actually be the powerful Yuan Ku who could defeat a spirit sword-level sword holder. Miss is staring at Bai like this. Do you want Bai to compose a poem for Miss to praise your beauty? This white-clothed Yuan Ku revealed a somewhat regretful expression. It's a pity that Bai really doesn't have the mood to recite a poem today. Miss, please forgive me. Let me ask you, where did I take our friend? Jiyu Shenyuan put away her curiosity towards this white-clothed Yuan Ku. The execution immortal sword in her hand was directly pointed at the other party's neck, preparing to force Lu Shihua and the others to tell her the way down. Good sword. Unexpectedly, this white-clothed Yuan Ku was completely not intimidated by the sword in Jiyu Xuanyuan's hand. Instead, he stretched out his right hand, wanting to grab the execution immortal sword in front of him and carefully study and admire it. Humph! How could Jiyu Shenyuan let this white-clothed Yuan Ku have his way? The execution immortal sword in her hand slightly trembled. It turned into an afterimage and directly slashed towards the white-clothed Yuan Ku's throat. Seeing Jiyu Xuanyuan's swordplay, the white-clothed Yuan Ku's expression was first joyful. However, this joyful expression quickly turned into a shocked expression. Both of his hands reached out and his 10 fingers flicked the execution immortal sword's blade more than a dozen times. Jiyu Shenyuan was stunned to find that the execution immortal sword was involuntarily turned back under the effect of a strange force. If it wasn't for Jiyu Xuanyuan's quick reaction and skillfully dispelling the force coming from the execution immortal sword, the execution immortal sword would have already flown out of her hand. Of course, because Jiyu Xuanyuan's hand had already fused with the execution immortal sword, Jiyu Shenyuan should have flown out along with the execution immortal sword. Good swordplay. This one is Jiannan's Li Bai. May I ask for Mrs. Great Name? The white-clothed Yuan Ku cupped his fist and asked Jiyu Shenyuan. Chapter 1150. When the white-robed Yuanko announced his name, he looked at Jiyu Shenyuan with a face full of joy. He felt that as long as he announced his name, Jiyu Shenyuan would turn pale with fright. Then, she would kowtow and worship him, becoming his little fangirl. Unfortunately, after hearing Li Bai's name, Jiyu Shenyuan did not have any reaction. It was as if this name was just an ordinary name, no different from names like Wang Ergu, Li Jiongguo, or Chen Yuanchao. The bright moonlight in front of the bed, suspected to be frost on the ground. Suddenly, Li Bai recited a poem. Then, he stared at Jiyu Xuanyuan's expression, expecting her to reveal a look of sudden enlightenment, followed by an expression of shock. But to Li Bai's disappointment, Jiyu Shenyuan still did not have any reaction. It was as if this poem had never existed in Jiyu Xuanyuan's mind. The flying stream descends 3,000 feet, suspected to be the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. Raising a cup to invite the bright moon, the shadow becomes 3 people. The peach blossom pond is 1,000 feet deep, not as deep as the love Wang Lun gave me. Leaving the White Emperor in the morning among the colorful clouds, 1,000 miles of jiangling will be returned in a day. Hua will exchange for good wine. With you, we will share the sorrow of eternity. Li Bai recited dozens of ancient classic poems in one breath, hoping that one sentence would be able to stir Jiyu Xuanyuan's thoughts. But what made Li Bai feel despair was that these poems not only did not make Jiyu Shenyuan have any reaction that Li Bai hoped for, but instead made her reveal an expression as if she was looking at an idiot. In fact, Jiyu Shenyuan also felt that she had met an idiot Yuan Ku. Otherwise, why would this Yuan Ku recite poems by himself? Could it be that he was a poet in his previous life? Ha 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 ha. Li Bai laughed dryly. At this moment, he confirmed that the other party had indeed never heard of his name. He awkwardly pretended to be heroic. It seems that I, Li Bai, have been thinking too much. I thought that in this future, my name, Li Bai, would be known by everyone. What a joke, what a joke. Ha 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 ha. Hearing Li Bai's words, Jiyu Shenyuan finally understood that the other party might really be a poet. Just now, he recited so many poems in one breath just to let her recognize his identity. It was a pity that the other party didn't seem to know that something like the great cultural destruction had happened in the world, and all the ancient poems were incomplete. Even if 1 or 2 ancient poems were passed down, no one knew who the author of these ancient poems was. This also explained another fact. This Yuan Ku named Li Bai seemed to have just traveled to this world. He knew that this world was the future, but he didn't know the specific situation of this world. I have heard of the name Li Bai. At this time, Yi Wenjun, who was hiding behind Jiyu Shenyuan, suddenly spoke up. I once read about Li Bai's name in some of the diaries left behind by the ancestors. Oh. Yi Wenjun's words caused Jiyu Xuanyuan's eyes to light up. At the same time, Li Bai also revealed a curious expression. Tell me, what did Zhetian Zhendi write in this diary? Let me think. The original words seem to be like this. Yi Wenjun thought for a while and began to recite. Today, I was drinking with an old friend. He said that he found a well-preserved complete Tang dynasty poem in the ruins. When he saw the poem left behind by Li Bai, he couldn't help but be fascinated. He wanted to drink and sing with Li Bai and ask him about life. I say, so what if you meet Li Bai? Won't you still have to pull out your sword Maiden and fight to the death with him? My old friend was rendered speechless by my words. After a while, he faintly said, but I don't want to fight with him. I only want to discuss poetry with him. I want to talk about the magnificent era of the Tang dynasty. Seeing my old friend's displeasure, my heart is also very gloomy. Actually, I really want to meet Li Bai, but I have no interest in talking about poetry with him. I only want to spar with him in swordsmanship. I want to borrow this sword Immortal's swordsmanship to see the gap between me and that person. Because I will never be able to spar with him again in this lifetime. It was obvious that Yi Wenjun's mind was filled with restoring his Yi clan's glory. Otherwise, he wouldn't have memorized his ancestors' diary. This was something that only people who worshipped their ancestors to the extreme would do. However, as Yi Wenjun recited the diary, two people piqued Ji Xuanyuan's curiosity. One was an old friend who drank with Zhe Tianzhendi, and the other was the person that Zhe Tianzhendi talked about. Why did Zhe Tianzhendi feel that after fighting Li Bai, he would know the gap between him and that person? This was something that Ji Shenyuan was very curious about. There are still people who remember me in this world. After listening to Yi Wenjun's recitation, Li Bai finally showed a somewhat gratified expression. However, Li Bai didn't have time to be gratified for long. He found that his neck was once again pressed against the tip of a sword. Li Bai looked at the sword and said helplessly, "Why do you have to be like this again? Why can't you talk to me properly, girl? Let's be like that old friend and talk about spring flowers and autumn moons, and how great the Tang dynasty is. If you want to talk about these things, that's fine. But first, tell me, where did you take my friends?" Ji Shenyuan said coldly. "Your friends? Your friends are two women. One is around 50 years old, with a stern look on her face, and has 4 sword sheaths hanging on her waist. The other is a young girl around 20 years old." Li Bai asked as he yawned. "That's them." Ji Shenyuan nodded her head. Although Li Bai's description wasn't very accurate, it all matched up with Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit. For two women to appear in this place at this time and place, other than Mu Shui's sword spirit and Lu Shihua, there was no other possibility. "Oh. Then you don't need to look for them," Li Bai sighed. "They're already dead. I buried them with my own hands. It's already been a few hours. Restrain your grief and accept fate." Although she had already guessed that Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives were already gone, hearing Li Bai say these words with her own ears, Ji Shenyuan still felt like a bolt from the blue had exploded in her mind. Ji Shenyuan had a feeling that Li Bai wasn't lying. What he said was the truth. No matter what sword wielders Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit were, with their bodies buried in the sand for a few hours, even an Emperor sword-grade medical pod wouldn't be able to save them. Lu Shihua was already dead. Ji Shenyuan couldn't help but think of every memory she had with Lu Shihua. From when Lu Shihua had saved her from the ruins with Ji Xuanyuan's attitude, she had lived in Lu Shihua's house for a month. Lu Shihua had taken good care of her meticulously. Lu Shihua had followed her to learn the sword, in Yuzhong City's court. When she had handed over the position of Yuzhong City's sword tower pavilion master to her, and when she had gone to Shanhai Pass and waved goodbye to Lu Shihua. Who would have thought that this would be their farewell forever? "Then you can die too." The Zhuxian sword in Ji Xuanyuan's hand flashed. This battle with the poet immortal was unavoidable. Chapter 1151. Why are we fighting? Li Bai revealed a puzzled expression. "I have just arrived in this world. Moreover, I have no enmity with Miss, so why does Miss want to kill me?" Less nonsense. Ji Shenyuan was not willing to listen to Li Bai's explanation anymore. The Zhuxian sword in her hand suddenly shook out countless sword qi. Each of these sword qi could easily tear apart steel. Once hit by these sword qi, even if Li Bai was an immortal, he would still die here. Seeing this sky full of sword qi, Li Bai's pupils instantly shrank. He knew that this beautiful young lady was not joking with him. She really wanted to kill him. Flying sword art floating clouds, vassals come west. Li Bai used one hand to pull out his waist. The belt that was tied around his waist was instantly pulled out by Li Bai. The entire belt in Li Bai's hand was crazily twitching like a live eel. Li Bai's belt was actually a sword. A sword that could be tied around his waist like a belt. At the moment when Ji Xuanyuan's sword qi attacked, this belt also released countless sword qi. It directly collided with Ji Xuanyuan's sword qi. An intense explosion sound erupted in the air. The entire world began to tremble violently. The yellow sand on the ground flew in all directions under the attack of the sword qi. In an instant, it filled the entire space. It was as if they had arrived in a huge haze where the visibility was less than a meter. Yi Wenjun stood in the same place. He looked around him in panic. As far as the eye could see, he could only see the yellow sand dancing in the air. The visibility had already dropped to less than a meter. At this moment, if Yi Wenjun stretched out his hand straight forward, he would not be able to see his palm clearly. This was a blank world. A world that could be called a yellow night, just like the dark night. However, although Yi Wenjun was unable to clearly see the situation in his surroundings, he could sense from the violent explosions ringing in his ears, as well as the increasingly dense yellow sand that wished to bury him. Jiyu Shenyuan and Li Bai were currently engaged in an incomparably intense battle. Furthermore, this battle was becoming more and more intense. Perhaps, both sides had already reached the point where they were fighting to the death. In this pitch-black yellow night, Yi Wenjun had lost the ability to control time and space. He did not know how much time had passed. He also did not know if he had moved or not. Luckily, I have a personal terminal. Just as Yi Wenjun was about to use his personal terminal to determine the time, he was horrified to find that the time function of his personal terminal was actually messed up. The number representing the time jumped thousands of times per second. Obviously, the personal terminal's timekeeping function was disrupted by some force. Could it be that their swordsmanship has reached a level where they can interfere with time and space? Yi Wenjun looked in the direction of the explosion in horror. This discovery had already exceeded Yi Wenjun's imagination. What kind of swordsmanship could be so powerful? Helpless, Yi Wenjun could only completely give up on probing into time and helplessly wait for the battle to end. As far as Yi Wenjun knew, some battles between top experts were very short as a few seconds to decide the winner. Some of them were so long that they wouldn't end even after 100 years. After about 20 to 30 math lessons, Yi Wenjun suddenly realized that the intense explosion had disappeared without a trace. Then, the yellow sand that filled the sky began to slowly disperse. Even the chaotic time on his personal terminal had returned to normal. However, this time was still at the moment when the battle began. Yi Wenjun knew that it should be over by now. The yellow night was about to disperse. He was ready to wait for the final victor to be born and see if it was Li Bai or Jiyu Shenyuan who had survived. "How are you? I didn't hurt you, did I?" Hearing the familiar and beautiful voice in his ear, Yi Wenjun breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that the final victor had been born. Jiyu Shenyuan had won this earth-shattering battle. "Miss Shenyuan, don't worry. I'm not hurt. Where are you? Do you need me to help you? Give me the med bay." Jiyu Shenyuan stopped mid-sentence. Yi Wenjun felt a heavy body pressing down on him. "Miss Shenyuan, Miss Shenyuan." Yi Wenjun struggled to hold Jiyu Shenyuan's body in his arms. As a result, he found that Jiyu Shenyuan's current condition was quite bad. Her body was covered with all kinds of scars. Blood flowed out of Jiyu Shenyuan's body quickly. Soon, Jiyu Shenyuan and Yi Wenjun's body were all dyed bright red. It seemed that although Jiyu Shenyuan had won the battle with Li Bai, Jiyu Shenyuan had also suffered great damage from Li Bai. Judging from the current state, if it was delayed for a while, Jiyu Shenyuan was likely to die from exhaustion of her blood. Therefore, just like what Jiyu Shenyuan said before she fainted, Yi Wenjun must immediately take out his med bay and put Jiyu Shenyuan in for treatment. However, Yi Wenjun seemed to have forgotten about this point, and was just constantly shaking Jiyu Xuanyuan's body, slapping Jiyu Xuanyuan's face, wanting to wake Jiyu Shenyuan up from his unconscious state. However, this was obviously an impossible thing. Yi Wenjun's actions not only did not wake Jiyu Shenyuan up, but because of the violent shaking, Jiyu Shenyuan's wounds were unable to heal by themselves. More blood was shaken out by Yi Wenjun during the shaking process. As Jiyu Shenyuan lost more blood, Jiyu Shenyuan's face became pale, her skin became cold, and her breathing became extremely weak. Even if Jiyu Shenyuan had completely stopped breathing, Yi Wenjun still kept shaking until she could no longer shake out a single drop of blood. Only then did Yi Wenjun stop her movements. She panted crazily and screamed as if she had seen a ghost. She threw Jiyu Shenyuan's body away, letting it roll a few times in the desert. Those bloody wounds were instantly covered with hot yellow sand, and her whole body was like a little yellow man. Whoa! Seeing this scene, Yi Wenjun raised both of her hands to the sky. She wanted to tear her vocal cords apart. After letting out a crazy cry, She fell to the ground powerlessly and began to cry loudly. Wah! I'm a beast. I'm a bastard. Wah! Yi Wenjun was like a child who had done something wrong, crying helplessly. However, she was also like a child who had done something wrong. Her crying was mixed with some self-comforting perfunctory words, but there was not much remorse to speak of. You've succeeded. What are you crying for? Crocodile tears. Behind Yi Wenjun, a faint voice that sounded like the voice of a big boss behind the scenes suddenly rang out. It was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman. Yi Wenjun did not know what to say. She could only use an even more miserable cry to cover up her complicated feelings. Let's go. There is no longer any value in staying here. This voice appeared in front of Yi Wenjun again. Yi Wenjun raised her head and saw a completely black sword floating in front of her. However, Yi Wenjun did not have any surprised expression. It was obvious that Yi Wenjun had long been accustomed to the existence of this sword. And this sword seemed to be hiding behind Yi Wenjun, the culprit who had suddenly planned everything. Why? Why do you want me to do such a thing? Yi Wenjun suddenly raised her head and questioned Black Sword with a strange, torn expression. Do you know? She is my benefactor's biological sister. Without my benefactor, I would have died in Yuzhang City. But now, you want me to kill my benefactor's biological sister. This biological sister wanted to protect me before she died, and asked if I was injured. What did you make me do? How strange. Didn't you do it yourself? Black Sword began to circle Yi Wenjun's body and said leisurely, Don't forget, I've never controlled your body. Everything you do is determined by your own will. I got what I wanted, and you will also get what you want. What's wrong with that? Nonsense, nonsense, nonsense. Seeing that Yi Wenjun could only use the words nonsense to refute him, even though Black Sword did not have a face, it seemed to have a mocking expression on its face. Humans were like this. They made choices based on their own desires, but in the end, they had to push the blame onto others. Black Sword knew this very well. When Yi Wenjun fell silent again, Black Sword asked slowly, Have you had enough? Yes. Yi Wenjun nodded. If it's enough, then let's go. We can't waste too much time here. You still have to return to Yuzhang City, Black Sword said. Miss Shenyuan. Her body. Don't we need to bury it? Yi Wenjun asked. He seemed to have retained the last bit of his conscience and did not want Jiyu Xuanyuan's body to be exposed in the wilderness. The world will bury her, Black Sword said in a hoarse and philosophical voice, leaving Yi Wenjun speechless. She could only wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes and stand up unsteadily. She was ready to leave with Black Sword. Bright moonlight before my bed, Li Bai sleeps soundly. Just as Yi Wenjun and Black Sword were about to leave, a melodious song came from somewhere. Yi Wenjun panicked. She felt as if something was tugging at her feet. When he looked down, he saw a belt around his ankle. Save me. Yi Wenjun let out a scream. The Black Sword slashed at the belt, wanting to cut it to pieces. However, when Yi Wenjun's sword struck the belt, it created sparks. Drunk. With a slight tug on the belt, Yi Wenjun could no longer control his center of gravity. He instantly fell to the ground. At the same time, two large hands that had experienced the vicissitudes of time suddenly reached out from under the desert. Then, a person slowly crawled out of the desert. Upon closer inspection, it was Li Bai, who should have died under Jiyu Xuanyuan's sword. Chapter 1152. You didn't die. Seeing Li Bai appear like a mummy, Yi Wenjun's expression was one of extreme fear. Just a little trick, or else I would have already died in An Lushan's hands. Li Bai retracted his hand, and the belt that was holding onto Yi Wenjun returned to Li Bai's hand. Then, Li Bai solemnly tied it back to his waist, and sang, The belt grows wider, and I regret. Because Li Bai had tied the belt back to his waist, Yi Wenjun instinctively began to think about how to escape. But then, Yi Wenjun thought that the reason why Li Bai had so easily retracted the belt was probably because Li Bai felt that even if he didn't use the soft sword in his hand, he could still easily deal with her. Thinking of this, Yi Wenjun immediately gave up on the idea of escaping. What do you plan to do with me? Yi Wenjun seemed to have calmed down, and very calmly asked Li Bai. I don't know. Li Bai shook his head. I just arrived here, and I was inexplicably involved in a battle with such a strong person. Are there strong people like this everywhere in this world? That's not it. I'm afraid you've met the most abnormal of us all. Yi Wenjun smiled helplessly. Then tell me, what's going on in this world? Why do you guys want to kill me as soon as you see me? I clearly didn't hurt any of you, okay? Li Bai also smiled bitterly. I'll have to start from where you guys came from 1,000 years ago. Yi Wenjun spent a few minutes to roughly tell Li Bai about the Great Apocalypse. Later, Li Bai asked why the humans of today hadn't heard his poem, so Yi Wenjun also confessed the story of the Great Apocalypse to Li Bai. While Yi Wenjun was speaking, the black sword floated quietly beside Yi Wenjun. The sword can actually transform into a girl's appearance. After listening to Yi Wenjun's narration, Li Bai's face was full of disbelief. He touched his belt and said thoughtfully, "Then can my green lotus sword also transform into the sword lady you speak of?" "I'm afraid not." Yi Wenjun explained the rules of the sword lady to Li Bai. Only a treasure sword that was born in this world could transform into a sword lady. Is that young lady also a sword maiden? Li Bai speculated. This. Of course. Yi Wenjun instinctively wanted to deny Li Bai's guess, but his heart skipped a beat and he changed his words. That sword maiden attacked me as soon as she saw me, and it's all because of you. You framed me, didn't you? After Li Bai understood the general situation of this world, he revealed the truth that Yi Wenjun feared the most with a gloomy expression. Yes, it's me. Yi Wenjun admitted it without hesitation. Tell me, how did you frame me? Why did you frame me? Li Bai asked the question that puzzled him the most. This was because Li Bai had been dumbfounded the entire time and had been passively involved in this conspiracy. Actually, I met Lord Li Bai yesterday. Yi Wenjun hesitated for a while, but still decided to tell the truth. Otherwise, if she incurred Li Bai's wrath, she wouldn't be able to escape. Yesterday. I remember now. Li Bai nodded thoughtfully. That day, I was practicing my swordsmanship nearby, and I met two girls who were fleeing, so I saved them. Now that I think about it, the person who chased after those two girls was probably you. That's me. Yi Wenjun nodded. So after you saw my swordsmanship, you planned to use my sword to kill someone, and get me to help you get rid of that sword maiden? Li Bai asked again. Yes. Yi Wenjun admitted it again. That's strange. That sword maiden's swordsmanship wasn't any weaker than mine. If I hadn't hidden in the sandpit and pretended to be dead, I'm afraid I would have been killed by that sword maiden. It didn't seem like you wanted to use my hand to kill that sword maiden, but more like you wanted to use that sword maiden to kill me. I didn't know. I didn't know that Jiyu Shenyuan was this powerful. I thought that with your strength, you would be able to kill her easily. Yi Wenjun said with a bitter smile. That's not right. Li Bai thought for a moment, then said, yesterday, Bai left this place. If it wasn't for the red sun being split by the sword chi, Bai wouldn't have returned here. Bai has always been at ease. Even Bai doesn't know where Bai stays at night. How can you guarantee that you'll be able to find Bai with that sword maiden? Actually, someone has been following you, Lord Li Bai. It's just that Lord Li Bai doesn't know it. Yi Wenjun said. Li Bai's eyes swept over Yi Wenjun's body, and finally stopped on the black sword. He said thoughtfully, the thing that's been following Bai is this black sword? Lord Li Bai is wise. Yi Wenjun admitted again. How did this black sword follow Bai? Li Bai revealed a confused expression. It's not that Bai is boasting, but even if there was a fly following Bai, Bai would be able to easily detect it. How did such an obvious black sword follow Bai and escape Bai's detection? Because this black sword can enter the void. As soon as Yi Wenjun's voice fell, a void door appeared next to the black sword. The black sword cut through the void door and disappeared without a trace. It really is magical. Li Bai jumped up in shock. Just a second ago, this black sword was in Li Bai's detection, but in the next second, it completely left Li Bai's detection. This is something that Li Bai has never encountered before. Lord Li Bai doesn't know about the void. Doesn't it have the ability to enter the void? Yi Wenjun was also shocked. What is the void? It's the crack that appeared just now. Bai has always only learned some sword skills. Things like the void are things that ox-nosed Taoists like to study. Bai has never been interested in anything like that. I can't believe that this Li Bai is just a meteor realm Yuan Ku. This is unbelievable. A meteor realm Yuan Ku can cause a commotion that isn't any weaker than any immortal sword wielder. At this time, Yi Wenjun realized that Li Bai was actually a meteor realm Yuan Ku who didn't have the ability to travel through the void. Of course, this couldn't be confirmed, because there were some extremely special universe realm and eon realm Yuan Ku who also didn't have the ability to travel through the void. Okay, Bai has a general understanding of the situation, but there's one last question. According to what you said before, humans and the Sword Lady should be fighting together, and that Sword Lady protected you in every way possible. If she hadn't risked her injuries to block a few sword chiefs attacking you, I'm afraid that the Sword Maiden would still be alive and well, and you would have been turned into a pile of minced meat long ago. When he asked this question, Li Bai's eyes were filled with deep contempt. This. I'm sorry, I don't want to answer this question. In the end, Yi Wenjun didn't know how to answer Li Bai's question, so she just chose to refuse. That's good too. Since you answered my questions, I can agree to one of your requests. Tell me, how do you want to die? Li Bai stood up and slightly clenched his hand. His palm was like a vacuum cleaner, sucking up countless grains of quicksand from the ground and gathering them in Li Bai's hand. The grains of sand quickly gathered together like a 3D printer, quickly forming the shape of a sword. Bai hates traitors the most. Killing you will dirty Bai's sword, so Bai will use this quicksand sword to end your despicable life. Li Bai's actions shocked Yi Wenjun. Because of the harmonious atmosphere just now, Yi Wenjun thought that she had dispelled Li Bai's hostility towards her. Li Bai thought that he would let her live because she answered so many questions for him, but in the end, it was all for naught. Li Bai still wanted to kill her. No, you can't kill me. We're on the same side, and we're on the same side. Yi Wenjun screamed. Interesting. Didn't you just say that Bai is a Yuan Ku from the 2D world, and you are a native human of this world? Are you and Bai natural enemies? Why are you on the same side now? Li Bai said as he approached Yi Wenjun step by step. Black sword, come out. Yi Wenjun shouted at the air beside her. Soon, a crack appeared in the void again, and the black sword that had disappeared in the void returned to normal. Look at this black sword. This is not an ordinary black sword, it is Ming Yuan Gendi's token. I am Ming Yuan Gendi's. Ming Yuan Gendi, do you know? She's the most powerful Yuenko, just like you. I'm her collaborator, we're one. Yi Wenjun had no choice but to reveal her biggest secret. It turned out that Yi Wenjun was backed by Ming Yuan Gendi, the biggest traitor in human history. I don't know any Ming Yuan Gendi. Li Bai shook his head. No matter who you work for, you are a traitor. You can die now. Li Bai was unmoved. The sand sword in his hand reflected the light of the sun, as if announcing Yi Wenjun's death. No, I can't die. The shrouding heavens family hasn't been revived in my hands yet. How can I die in the hands of a Yuan Ku? Yi Wenjun grabbed the black sword and said, Ming Yuan Gendi, save me. You promised me that you would use the giant void hand to take me away if I was in danger. My life wouldn't be in any danger. Hurry and save me. Save me. Unfortunately, no matter how much Yi Wenjun screamed and begged, the black sword did not respond. Traitor, looks like you've been betrayed too. Seeing this, Li Bai couldn't help but smile mockingly. This is a laughable life. I hope you can remember this life's lesson and be a good person in your next life. With that, Li Bai slashed down with the sand sword, aiming for Yi Wenjun's white neck. Chapter 1153. In the end, Yi Wenjun didn't die under Li Bai's sword because a sword blocked Li Bai's blade. However, this sword wasn't the Netheriris Sword Emperor's black sword but Jiyu Xuanyuan's exterminating immortal sword. Li Bai raised his head and saw Jiyu Shenyuan, who was covered in sand, standing behind Yi Wenjun in a sorry state. She used the Zhuxian sword in her hand to block his quicksand sword. What? Did I become a good person for nothing? Li Bai laughed at himself, then dispersed the quicksand sword. Since the victim stopped him from killing this beast, then why should he be a bad person who didn't know what was good for him? Apologies, Lord Li Bai, I still have some questions to ask him, he can't die now. Ji Shenyuan said apologetically. Ah, ghost. Yi Wenjun, who reacted, turned his head and saw Ji Xuanyuan's calm face. He jumped up as if he had seen a ghost, and started to run away frantically. Ji Shenyuan didn't chase after him, and just shot out a sword chi from the Zhuxian sword in his hand, which cut through Yi Wenjun's legs, and hit his hamstring. Therefore, Yi Wenjun fell forward, and completely lost the ability to move. He could only lie on the ground and wait for Ji Xuanyuan's judgment. Why? I clearly saw that all your blood had flowed out, so why are you still alive? This is impossible, this is impossible. Yi Wenjun, who had lost the ability to move, muttered to himself as he lay on the ground. He still couldn't believe that Ji Shenyuan was unharmed. My blood has indeed flowed out, but this doesn't mean that I'm dead. A small capsule the size of a BB bullet suddenly appeared in Ji Xuanyuan's hand. Through the transparent shell of the capsule, it could be seen that this capsule contained some golden liquid. Emperor's blood. Yi Wenjun was, after all, a descendant of the Emperor's sword family, and his knowledge far surpassed other sword wielders. Therefore, he immediately recognized what was in Ji Xuanyuan's hand, and understood that he had been tricked by Ji Shenyuan. Ji Shenyuan shouted for Yi Wenjun to quickly use the medical pod to save him, but he secretly had a capsule with Emperor's blood in his mouth. Ji Shenyuan did this to test Yi Wenjun's reaction, to see if Yi Wenjun had the intention to kill her. In the end, the naive Yi Wenjun fell for it. He really thought that this was a great opportunity to kill Ji Shenyuan, so not only did he not put Ji Shenyuan into the medical pod in time, he even shook Ji Xuanyuan's body with all his might, trying to shake all the blood out of Ji Xuanyuan's body. In the end, just as Ji Shenyuan was about to completely lose consciousness, she bit open the sovereign blood capsule hidden in her mouth. Under the effect of the sovereign blood, her body, which had originally become an empty shell, began to produce new blood at a crazy rate. This was because Yi Wenjun had already believed in the illusion that Ji Shenyuan had lost all of her blood. In a panic, she did not confirm further and revealed her true appearance. With Li Bai's help, he revealed many facts that Ji Shenyuan couldn't imagine. He also revealed the identity of the mastermind behind the scenes. Now that you put it that way, didn't you use me for nothing? Hearing the conversation between Ji Shenyuan and Yi Wenjun, Li Bai said with some dissatisfaction, did you already know that I was hiding in the sandpit, but deliberately didn't find me, so that I could help you force out the truth? That's not it. I never thought that Lord Li Bai would actually stand on the side of justice. Ji Shenyuan spread out her hands. To be honest, I thought that Lord Li Bai was together with him, and just wanted to take a look. That's where you're wrong. How can there be a side of justice in this world? You're just thinking that you're righteous for nothing. Li Bai's face was full of sarcasm. No. Hearing Li Bai's sarcasm, Ji Shenyuan suddenly became incomparably serious, and said solemnly, I am justice. I am the partner of justice. Is that so? Hearing Ji Xuanyuan's words, Li Bai looked indifferent on the surface, but his heart was in turmoil. Li Bai had to admit that he was moved by these words. Next, it's your business. After Li Bai finished speaking, Ji Shenyuan walked over to Yi Wenjun's side, looking at Yi Wenjun who was constantly struggling to get up from the ground. Ji Shenyuan let out a long sigh, and said somewhat woodenly, if you weren't the descendant of Zhetian Jendi, if you weren't the only descendant of Yi Qing, I would definitely kill you, and get rid of a scourge like you for humanity. But since you're the only descendant of Yi Qing, then I'll let you off the hook. If you tell me the whole story, I can let you live. If you promise not to tell anyone about what happened today, then I can tell you the truth. Yi Wenjun's words had not finished, when the black sword suddenly jumped out of the void, and said with a sharp and gloomy voice, Yi Wenjun, don't forget your beloved woman. Noisy. No one was able to clearly see what Ji Xuanyuan's actions were. In the next second, the black sword was grabbed by Ji Xuanyuan's hand, even the black sword itself was caught off guard, and was completely unable to react, while its mouth was still threatening Yi Wenjun. I want to see, what is your true face? As Ji Xuanyuan's voice fell, A large amount of sword essence was injected into the black sword through Jiyu Xuanyuan's right hand. Because this black sword was not Jiyu Xuanyuan's sword mother, or perhaps this flying sword was not even a sword mother, when a large amount of sword essence was forcefully injected into it, the black sword faced the fate of collapse. Sure enough, after Jiyu Shenyuan absorbed about 10,000 quarks of sword essence, the entire black sword began to tremble violently, and the black color on the surface of the blade actually began to fall off bit by bit, revealing the color of white iron within. Ah! The black sword let out a scream. It seems like the person hiding behind the black sword was suffering a great deal of pain. Jiyu Shenyuan. Guhan. You are only a part of fate, you cannot escape the end of fate. Ah! After leaving behind a heart-wrenching scream, the black sword no longer made any sound, and at this time, the black surface of the black sword had completely fallen off, revealing its true sword body. A man-made sword mother aqua blue sword? Looking at the true appearance of the black sword, Jiyu Shenyuan had an expression of I have already guessed it. Jiyu Shenyuan had already guessed that the true body of this black sword was most likely a man-made sword mother. Obviously, the reason why this black sword could speak like a human, and could even split the void, was because the mastermind's consciousness fragment was hidden within this black sword. And it was impossible for a normal sword to store a consciousness fragment, only a man-made sword mother could do this. Of course, a natural sword mother could also do this, but using a natural sword mother to store a consciousness fragment was a little too extravagant. Moreover, the natural sword mother itself happened to have a strong consciousness, unless the sword mother herself did not want to live, or the entire natural sword mother was destroyed. Otherwise, even if the flood-level Yuan Ku made a move, it would be impossible to directly erase the natural sword mother's consciousness, so the true body of this black sword could only be a man-made sword mother. I wonder if this man-made sword mother can still be used normally. Jiyu Shenyuan hesitated as he looked at the man-made sword lady that had revealed its true appearance. This man-made sword lady looked as good as new, without any abnormalities at all. It would be a pity if it was destroyed just like that. After all, every man-made sword lady required a large amount of resources to create. But this was, after all, a man-made sword mother that was once occupied by the consciousness fragment of the mastermind. If that mastermind had placed some traps inside the sword mother, when the new sword wielder synchronized with this man-made sword mother, would he be like the current Yi Wenjun, tempted by the consciousness fragment, and degenerate into a traitor of humanity? Put this sword on me. Suddenly, the execution immortal sword in Jiyu Xuanyuan's hand spoke. Hearing this, Jiyu Shenyuan did as she was told without hesitation, and put the two swords together. A beam of golden light entered the man-made sword lady's aqua blue sword from the immortal vanquishing sword's body and then exited. The immortal vanquishing sword said lightly, "There's no problem. This man-made sword lady's interior is very clean." It seems like the execution immortal sword let its consciousness walk inside this man-made sword mother. Jiyu Shenyuan secretly guessed. At the same time, she was even more surprised by the execution immortal sword's origin and ability. This was an ability that she had never heard of before. She had never heard of a natural-born sword mother being able to freely break through the shackles of her own body and enter another sword mother's body. Although King Yu's consciousness fragment had also done this, it was done without a sword body, and was very different from the execution immortal sword, which had not even completely synchronized with the sword mother. But since the execution immortal sword had confirmed the safety of this man-made sword mother, Jiyu Shenyuan believed it, and put the man-made sword mother into her dimensional pocket, preparing to find an opportunity to give it to Yuzhong City for use. After settling the matter with Black Sword, Jiyu Shenyuan once again directed her attention to Yi Wenjun. But at this moment, Yi Wenjun was clearly affected by Black Sword's last sentence. Her head was lowered, her body and face were tense, and she had an expression that said, "I have nothing to say." Yi Wenjun, don't forget about the woman you love. Thinking of this sentence that made Yi Wenjun shut up, Jiyu Shenyuan nodded thoughtfully. It was very clear that the person Yi Wenjun loved was controlled by Ming Yuan Jendi. This was probably one of the reasons why Yi Wenjun would betray her, betray humanity, and secretly kill her. Then the crux of the problem fell on the woman Yi Wenjun loved. Who was this woman? Jiyu Shenyuan instinctively began to recall the time when she and Yi Wenjun had experienced together, when they went to the Chongyang mountain range. She, Yi Wenjun, Song Yifei, and Liuyan Ling, the four of them fought side by side. Wait. A bolt of lightning struck Jiyu Xuanyuan's mind. She suddenly realized who the woman Yi Wenjun loved was. Chapter 1154. Yifei. Song Yifei. Is she in Mingyuan Jiandi's hands right now? Jiyu Shenyuan squatted down and grabbed Yi Wenjun's collar. She pulled him in front of her and asked loudly, How? How do you know? How do you know about Yifei? When Yi Wenjun heard Song Yifei's name, it was as if she had eaten a mouthful of oil and vinegar at the same time. Her facial expression began to change drastically, and her facial features were almost squeezed together. Such a drastic reaction proved that Jiyu Shenyuan's guess was right. The woman Yi Wenjun loved was undoubtedly Song Yifei, and Song Yifei was probably under the Netheriris Sword Emperor's control right now. As for why Jiyu Shenyuan could guess that this woman was Song Yifei, the reason was very simple. When they were adventuring together, Jiyu Shenyuan noticed that Yi Wenjun's eyes were always on Song Yifei. Especially when Song Yifei acted very close to him, the sadness contained in Yi Wenjun's eyes could be easily noticed by anyone who was slightly observant. Moreover, Guhan knew very well that Song Yifei liked him. She had put all her love on him. At that time, he was Yi Wenjun's savior and he had brought Yi Wenjun to find the treasure left by his ancestor. He was too ashamed to compete for Song Yifei's love. He could only hide this love deep in his heart and reveal it inadvertently. Although Guhan had noticed this a long time ago, Yi Wenjun was still a good young man at that time. Guhan believed that as time went by, Yi Wenjun would definitely let go of his fantasies about Song Yifei. Therefore, he never dealt with these things. But now, it seemed that this love was not controlled. Instead, it became more and more intense. Of course, based on this guess, the evidence was still a bit thin. Guhan and Yi Wenjun did not have much contact. If Yi Wenjun liked another girl, then Guhan would not know. How could he be so sure that the woman controlled by Mingyuan Jiandi was Song Yifei? Of course, there were other reasons for this. Most importantly, Song Yifei's sword lady was not any other sword lady. It was the sword lady of the demonic iris sword that belonged to the demonic iris sword emperor. Back then, after Mingyuan Jiandi had betrayed the humans, she had left all of her sword ladies to the humans, except for the emperor sword lady. This was equivalent to her betrayal alone. Because of this and the fact that Mingyuan Jiandi rarely appeared in front of humans after becoming Yuan Ku, he rarely became enemies with humans. In fact, the dimensional rift where Mingyuan Jiandi resided could even be open to humans, providing a zone where humans and Yuan Ku could coexist peacefully. Therefore, although the human government had reached the abyss of history with Mingyuan Jiandi, and had become the most hated traitor of the human race, Mingyuan and Jiandi had become the human race's most hated traitor. However, in reality, Mingyuan Jiandi's reputation was not bad. Humans did not insult Mingyuan Jiandi all day long. It was also because of this that Guhan had let down his guard when he found out that Song Yifei's sword lady was the Mingyuan sword. He felt that it was not a big deal and that it was just an ordinary sword lady. He could not treat the Mingyuan sword differently just because it had once been Mingyuan Jiandi's sword lady. Otherwise, he would hurt the sword lady's heart. Furthermore, the sword ladies that Mingyuan Jiandi had left behind had gradually coordinated with the other swordbearers. They got along very normally and peacefully, and nothing strange had happened in their lives. Many swordbearers had died on the battlefield for humans. However, Jiyu Shenyuan had neglected the Mingyuan sword. Mingyuan Jiandi's title came from the Mingyuan sword, so the Mingyuan sword definitely had a special meaning to Mingyuan Jiandi. Furthermore, ever since the Mingyuan sword had left Mingyuan Jiandi, it had never synchronized with the other swordbearers. Guhan had neglected this point at the time, but now that he thought about it, there must be a deeper meaning behind it. Perhaps Mingyuan Jiandi had hidden some shocking conspiracy in the Mingyuan sword. Even after synchronizing with the Mingyuan sword, Song Yifei's behavior was very normal. There was nothing suspicious about it, so Guhan gradually stopped thinking about it. However, 3 months after Guhan entered the Shanhai Pass, Guhan noticed that Song Yifei was stammering when he tried to contact her. He felt that something was wrong. A year and a half after entering the Shanhai Pass, Guhan realized that he had completely lost contact with Song Yifei. Although he could still call Song Yifei never responded to Guhan's calls. She would only let the beeping sound on the communicator until Guhan gave up and hung up. Unfortunately, Guhan didn't think too much about it at the time. He only thought that Song Yifei might have given up on his friendship and found a new love of her own, so she didn't want to contact him anymore. However, because he was like a little girl and didn't want to hang up, Guhan almost never contacted Song Yifei again. He hoped that Song Yifei would find her own happiness. Now, it seemed that Guhan was very wrong. Song Yifei might not have fallen into a new love, but had fallen into Ming Yuan Gendi's hands. He didn't know what happened to Song Yifei to make her fall into Ming Yuan Gendi's hands, but there was one thing he didn't doubt. The Ming Yuan sword must have played an important role in this. Sigh. Jiyu Shenyuan sighed in her heart. I haven't rescued Lu Shihua yet, I haven't solved the problem with the Immortal Slayer sword, and I haven't found Artoria yet. Now, I have to find a way to free Song Yifei from Ming Yuan Gendi's hands no matter how hard I try. Jiyu Shenyuan said to Yi Wenjun, don't worry, Song Yifei is my brother's good friend. I'll do my best to save her from Ming Yuan Gendi's hands. You must tell me everything you know so that I can come up with a plan that has the highest chance of success. Ha ha. Unexpectedly, after hearing Jiyu Xuanyuan's words, Yi Wenjun let out a few dry laughs from the depths of her throat, and with a strange crying voice, she said, yes, it's not in their hands. She's my brother's girlfriend. Oh, no, your brother doesn't like Yifei at all. He likes that woman from the Liu family, right? What a joke. Yifei comes crying to me almost every night, saying that the person she loves doesn't care about her at all. But how would she know that the person I love has never cared about me? Yi Wenjun said in despair. Tears flowed out of her eyes and nostrils. It was hard to tell which were tears and which were snot. Do you know how much of a jerk your brother is? Do you know how shameless and greedy your brother is? Yi Wenjun screamed like a parrot that had been strangled. It doesn't matter if your brother loves the women of the Liunyan clan or the power of the Liunyan clan. Since he has never cared about Yifei, why didn't he just tell Yifei? Why didn't he kill Yifei's thoughts so that Yifei could be with me? His hanging like this. It's very interesting to hang like this, isn't it? It shows how charming he is, isn't it? It shows how kind and loving he is, and how he doesn't want to be hurt, isn't it? It proves that he is the main character of the harem novel, and that I, Yi Wenjun, am just a pitiful villain, right? Yi Wenjun's series of deafening questions caused Jiyu Xuanyuan's hand to loosen, and Yi Wenjun lost his support and fell back onto the desert. But at this moment, Yi Wenjun's emotions had already erupted to the extreme. Both of his hands were tightly inserted into the scorching hot yellow sand, both of his fists were grabbing out handfuls of yellow sand, crazily throwing them towards the sky, many of which hit Jiyu Xuanyuan's body, hitting Jiyu Xuanyuan's eyes. Guhan, you bastard! You bastard! Yi Wenjun screamed at the top of his lungs. Every word was filled with deep hatred for Guhan. At this moment, Jiyu Shenyuan suddenly understood that even if Song Yifei wasn't controlled by Ming Yuan Gendi, Yi Wenjun would still reach out to him in the end to take the cruelest and most useless revenge for his lost love. Do you know? After these negative emotions were vented out, Yi Wenjun's eyes finally recovered a bit of clarity. He raised his head and said to Jiyu Shenyuan in a hoarse voice, do you know? It's not that she ended up like this because of your little brother. It's because of your little brother's ruthlessness towards her and his disdain towards her that she fell into despair. That's why she was bewitched by Ming Yuan Gendi. Both of our tragedies are because of your little brother. It's all because of your little brother. Yi Wenjun cried and successfully pushed the blame onto Guhan's head. No, my little brother never disdained Song Yifei. I know my little brother very well. His only obsession in life is to eliminate all Yuan Ku. At that time, if Song Yifei is still willing, my little brother will be with her, Jiyu Shenyuan said in a daze. It was unknown whether she was making a promise for her little brother or for herself. Destroy all of the Yuan bandits. That's the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life. Yi Wenjun's expression was incomparably mocking. Tell your little brother that instead of thinking about exterminating all of the Yuan bandits, it's better to think about how to resist the future disaster. Even if your little brother can ascend to the throne and become the emperor, he'll still be a laughable joke in the face of this disaster. Wait. What disaster are you talking about? Jiyu Xuanyuan's heart trembled. This was not the first time she had heard of such a saying. Many people had told her that mankind would face an unprecedented disaster. Among them, there were peerless existences like the Sword Ancestor, and there was also Flowing Time Maple, the leveler of a different world. How would I know? They've never been willing to tell me any real secret. After saying this, Yi Wenjun powerlessly collapsed to the ground. She tore open her clothes and revealed her chest. She drew a circle around her heart and laughed. I won't tell you another word. You can kill me now. Chapter 1155. After hesitating for a long time, Jiyu Shenyuan did not kill Yi Wenjun in the end. This was because Jiyu Shenyuan did not want to see Zhe Tianzhendi's only bloodline end in her hands. Jiyu Shenyuan owed Yi Qing too much. Jiyu Shenyuan was not a saint. She would not let Yi Wenjun, who hated her so much and could cause her so much trouble, live freely in this world. Moreover, Yi Wenjun had betrayed humanity. According to human law, it would be reasonable for Jiyu Shenyuan to kill him. After much consideration, Jiyu Shenyuan decided to imprison Yi Wenjun for eternity. She teleported Yi Wenjun to the Great Formation of Trials on Changyang Mountain through the jasper ring on her finger, then controlled the formation to create a hopeless situation for Yi Wenjun that no sword wielder of famed swords could ever break through. Then, she arranged for Yuenko's memory cores nearby to keep a tight watch over the hopeless situation. Of course, Jiyu Shenyuan also considered the possibility that the mastermind behind Yi Wenjun could use the Hand of the Void to save Yi Wenjun. Fortunately, the trial formation that Yi Qing created had a small formation that shielded the power of the Void. Even if it was an Emperor Sword level or a Primordial level Yuan Ku, it would not be able to save Yi Wenjun in this area. Therefore, Jiyu Shenyuan was sure that unless she released Yi Wenjun would not be able to escape or be saved. This can also be considered as your ancestral land. I hope that the ancestral land can awaken your conscience and let you wake up in time. Jiyu Shenyuan finally said these words to Yi Wenjun, before imprisoning Yi Wenjun. Did you banish him into the void? Seeing Jiyu Shenyuan wave his hand and Yi Wenjun disappear inexplicably, Li Bai asked curiously. I guess so. Jiyu Shenyuan obviously could not explain to Li Bai about the trial formation. Seeing that Jiyu Xuanyuan's answer was very perfunctory, Li Bai laughed dryly and cupped his fists. Oh well, I have nothing to do with Bai anymore. Goodbye. Wait. Before Li Bai could leave, he was stopped by Jiyu Shenyuan again. Even Bai was used by you. What else do you want? Li Bai said unhappily. Lord Li Bai, please forgive me. About my two female friends, please tell me more details. What happened? Are they really dead? Although Jiyu Xuanyuan's expression was calm, but the trembling and grief in her voice could not be concealed no matter what. Sigh. What a sin. Probably hearing the emotions in Jiyu Shenyuan's words, Li Bai sighed and recounted the entire matter in detail from beginning to end. It turned out that Li Bai came to this world 5 days ago. As for how Li Bai came to this world, Li Bai deliberately avoided it. Of course, this had nothing to do with Lu Shihua, so Jiyu Shenyuan didn't ask this question, although Jiyu Shenyuan really wanted to know the story behind it. After coming to this world, Li Bai was very confused at first. At one point, he thought that he had been teleported away. He never thought that he had come to another world. It wasn't until Li Bai found the ruins of a city in the desert and found an incomplete copy of Romance of the Broken Tang Dynasty that he realized that he might have come to the future world. In the next few days, Li Bai tried to find some living people to answer the questions in his heart. However, Li Bai didn't meet a single living person. Instead, he met some strange monsters with many magical abilities. Li Bai fought with these monsters a few times and discovered that not only did these monsters have very strange abilities, they would not leave behind corpses after they died. All of them were suddenly sucked away by a whirlpool that suddenly appeared. Later, Li Bai even thought that humans might have perished because of these strange monsters. Of course, Li Bai didn't know that he was actually the same as these monsters, Yuan Ku. Yesterday afternoon, Li Bai, who was in a depressed mood, began to practice his sword art in the desert. This was also the origin of the sword mark that Jiyu Shenyuan saw before. As a result, Li Bai was halfway through practicing his swordsmanship when he found two women running for their lives in a frenzy. Behind the two women, there was a large group of monsters chasing after them. It wasn't easy for him to see his own kind, so Li Bai naturally chose to attack without hesitation. A few sword auras sent all the monsters back into the dimensional whirlpool. When he turned around, he saw two women, but they were covered in all kinds of wounds. Their blood was almost completely drained, just like Jiyu Shenyuan. Their consciousness had also become muddled due to the excessive blood loss caused by the long period of escape. Both of them were on the verge of death. Later, Li Bai took them to an oasis to treat them. When he asked them some questions, the two women were already dead. Li Bai had no choice but to put them in a coffin and bury them in an oasis with beautiful mountains and clear waters. Don't think that Bai likes to drink and write poems, but Bai is actually a very good doctor. I've already looked at the pupils of these two girls, looked at their breathing, felt their heartbeats, and even took their pulse. They are really dead, so I buried them in the coffin. Li Bai might have thought that Jiyu Shenyuan would blame him for randomly burying people, so Li Bai specially explained to prove that he was definitely burying dead people and not living people. Wait. Jiyu Shenyuan keenly sensed something unusual from Li Bai's superfluous words. Say it again, how did you bury them? Didn't I say it? Li Bai repeated helplessly. I found a place with beautiful scenery and good feng shui, dug a big hole and buried them. Oh right, I also made a tombstone with iron growing in its body to ensure that they didn't suffer any grievances after they died. That's not the point. Jiyu Shenyuan waved her hand. You just said that you buried them in a coffin? Yes. Li Bai nodded subconsciously. Of course the dead should be placed in a coffin, what's wrong with that? No, I'm just curious, Lord Li Bai, where did you get the coffin? Don't tell me you purposely chopped down the nearby wood to make the coffin? Or, did you bring this coffin over when you transmigrated? Jiyu Shenyuan immediately asked. Young lady, are you joking? How could Bai bring a coffin over? Li Bai stared at Jiyu Shenyuan with dissatisfaction. Moreover, I'm not a carpenter. I can't do carpentry. Li Bai shook his head. Then where did this coffin come from? Li Bai hesitated for a moment, then said hesitantly, you might not believe it, but these coffins suddenly appeared by themselves, and these two key coffins are made of transparent crystal, and the coffins can even glow. Bai has never seen such a magical coffin before. I'm afraid that even the emperor can't afford to use a coffin like this. How is this a coffin? It's clearly a medical pod. Jiyu Shenyuan complained in her heart, and at the same time, a sense of hope ignited in her heart. Obviously, these coffins. No, they're medical pods. These medical pods didn't appear out of thin air, they were taken out from the dimensional pocket by Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit before they completely lost consciousness, so that Li Bai could place them into the medical pods. If Li Bai could place them into the medical pods at the first instance, then Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives could be saved. Lord Li Bai, how long did it take for the two crystal coffins to appear before you placed them in? Jiyu Shenyuan hurriedly asked. There was quite a bit of time. Li Bai said solemnly. After they fainted, Bai performed a lot of emergency treatment on them, but unfortunately, it was to no avail, and was still unable to save their lives. After confirming that they had indeed met with misfortune, Bai then allowed them to rest in peace. Jiyu Shenyuan really wanted to give Li Bai a good scolding. If Li Bai hadn't done some unnecessary emergency treatment, then Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives would have been saved by now. However, Li Bai just had to make a move, which caused a lot of precious emergency treatment time to be wasted. Whether Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives would have become a huge question mark. However, Jiyu Shenyuan also knew in her heart that this couldn't be blamed on Li Bai. If Li Bai hadn't appeared in time to save Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives, Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives probably wouldn't have any hope at all. Forget it. I can only hope that Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's lives are tough. Jiyu Shenyuan sighed in her heart. Although there was still a theoretical 5 minutes of emergency treatment time after a person had completely lost their breath, pulse, and heartbeat, there was still a certain degree of hope that they could be revived within these 5 minutes as long as they tried their best to save them. However, this required not only the correct rescue measures, but also a lot of luck. With the medical pod, Jiyu Shenyuan didn't have to worry about whether the rescue measures would fail or not. She only had to worry about whether Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's luck was good enough, and how long this Lord Li Bai delayed before placing them in the medical pod after discovering that they had lost their breath and heartbeat. "Bring me there." Jiyu Shenyuan stood up abruptly, and said to Li Bai impatiently. "Bring you where?" Li Bai was a little confused. "Of course it's to bring me to the place where you buried them. Lord Li Bai doesn't even give me the right to pay my respects to them," Jiyu Shenyuan said lightly. "That's true." Bai made a slip of the tongue. Li Bai smiled apologetically, then used his finger to point towards the northwest direction and said, "It's right there. We'll be there in about 2 hours. It's getting late now, so we have to hurry up. Otherwise, it'll probably be dark by the time we get there." After saying that, Li Bai prepared to take big strides. There's no need to go through so much trouble. In the blink of an eye, Li Bai was stunned to see a dark red steel monster appear in front of him. Chapter 1156. What is this thing? Li Bai looked curiously at everything inside Yang Huang 3008. Everything in the maglev flying car was extremely novel to Li Bai. For example, Li Bai toyed with the button that controlled the car window for a full 5 minutes, controlling the car window more than 30 times before he could barely satisfy his curiosity. Then there was the rearview mirror, the chair that could move back and forth, the air conditioner that emitted cold air, the onboard computer that could be controlled with a touchscreen, the car lights that could be switched on and off, and the cigarette lighter that emitted a flame at the touch of a button. In short, everything in the maglev flying car was extremely novel to Li Bai. When the maglev flying car came to a stop, Jiyu Shenyuan called for Li Bai to alight. Li Bai was still a little reluctant, wishing that he could stay in the car and play with all these novelties. "Wow. It's really fast, almost as fast as an Lushan's Fergana horse," Li Bai exclaimed in admiration after estimating the time he had spent in the car. Jiyu Shenyuan did not want to ridicule the fact that a Fergana horse could catch up to a maglev flying car. Even a great poet like Li Bai had world-destroying swordsmanship, so it was not strange for a Fergana horse to surpass the speed of sound. Thanks to the huge tombstone that Li Bai had created, Jiyu Shenyuan immediately found the grave of Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit. When Jiyu Shenyuan got closer, she realized that Li Bai had found a large piece of concrete prefabricated board that had been abandoned 1,000 years ago to make the tombstone. No wonder Li Bai said that it was a stone with iron growing in its body. "The grave of 2 nameless madams." These were the words that Li Bai had carved on the tombstone with a sword. After those 9 large words, there were a few smaller words, left by Li Tai Bai of Jiannan. These words were written with the sword freely, fast and smooth, with a sense of elegance amidst the boldness and elegance. The structure was uneven and undulating, full of emotion and interest. Jiyu Shenyuan was full of praise when she saw it. At the very least, Jiyu Shenyuan would not have been able to write such good words if she were to write them herself. What Jiyu Shenyuan did not know was that if this tombstone had been placed in the era before the Great Calamity 1,000 years ago, just these few words alone would have been worth at least 100 million. This was the authentic work of Li Bai. In the whole world, except for the Palace Museum, which had Li Bai's on the balcony calligraphy, no other authentic work of Li Bai could be found. This was a priceless treasure. "You're in my way." With a sweep of Jiyu Xuanyuan's sword qi, this priceless tombstone was uprooted by Jiyu Shenyuan and he casually threw it on the ground. Looking at Li Bai who was chasing after him, the flesh on his face could not help but tremble a few times. "Young lady, are the words of white so unattractive to you?" Li Bai probably felt that Jiyu Shenyuan looked down on his words, so he uprooted the tombstone. Naturally, he felt extremely ashamed. "No way. It's much better than my handwriting," Jiyu Shenyuan casually replied, and no longer paid attention to Li Bai. The execution immortal sword blossomed with more than 10 sword qis. And these sword cheese, which were powerful enough to split gold and stone, were now reduced to pitiful excavators, as they began to crazily dig at the grave mound that Li Bai had filled. "Miss, what are you doing?" When Li Bai saw Jiyu Xuanyuan's even more excessive actions, he could not take it anymore. He also released more than 10 sword cheese to collide with Jiyu Xuanyuan's sword cheese, causing both of them to cancel each other out. Then, Li Bai stood in front of Jiyu Shenyuan and asked with righteous indignation, "Miss, could it be that you have been lying to White all along? That you are not the friend of these two ladies, but their enemy? What nonsense are you talking about?" Jiyu Shenyuan narrowed her eyes. "How could I be their enemy? Then miss, why did you dig up their graves? Do you want them to not be able to rest in peace even in death?" Li Bai thought that Jiyu Shenyuan wanted to dig up the graves of Lu Shihua and the others. In Li Bai's era, digging up graves could be said to be the #1 evil act in the world, and it was almost on the same level as killing people. "I can't explain it to you clearly right now, but please believe me, I definitely have no intention of harming my friend." To explain something like a medical cabin to someone like Li Bai who was thousands of years behind her, it was obviously not something that could be done with just a few words. Therefore, Jiyu Shenyuan could only guarantee in this way. "All right, I'd like to see what you're up to." Li Bai thought for a moment, then stepped aside. This way, Jiyu Shenyuan could continue digging. What Jiyu Shenyuan wanted to complain about was that Li Bai's work attitude was a bit too serious. Jiyu Shenyuan dug more than 20 meters deep, but she still couldn't find the coffins of Lu Shihua and the others. In the end, it was only when she dug 25 meters deep that her sword chi felt something hard. After laboriously digging away the surrounding soil, the two medical cabins finally revealed their true appearance. Thank the heavens! When Jiyu Xuanyuan's sword chi swept the two medical cabins to the ground, when Jiyu Shenyuan blew away the soil covering the glass cover of the medical cabins, and when Jiyu Shenyuan saw the situation inside through the glass, Jiyu Shenyuan said from the bottom of her heart. Jiyu Shenyuan saw a pair of lively, rolling eyes that contained infinite fear and surprise. "Sister Shenyuan." When the cover of the medical cabin was opened, Lu Shihua immediately threw himself into Jiyu Xuanyuan's arms and began to cry uncontrollably. The experience of the past 10 hours had given Lu Shihua great fear. Lu Shihua thought he was buried alive. In fact, Lu Shihua only suffered some flesh wounds, and no vital parts of his body were truly injured. He only died because he had lost all his blood. Therefore, the treatment of the medical cabin was relatively simple. She only needed to heal Lu Shihua's wounds, quickly produce the lost blood, and at the same time find a way to awaken Lu Shihua's consciousness. Precisely because the treatment process was simple, Lu Shihua's treatment was completed after only 7 or 8 hours. At about 6 a.m. this morning, he woke up in the medical cabin. After waking up, Lu Shihua found himself in the most terrifying moment of his life. When Lu Shihua woke up and wanted to open the cover of the medical bay to leave, he was horrified to find that the medical bay system had notified him that the cover of the medical bay could not be opened due to the immense pressure. Only then did Lu Shihua realize that the situation outside was a bit strange. At first, Lu Shihua thought it was night time, so it was dark outside of Liao City. But it was only then that Lu Shihua realized that there was something wrong with the night outside. Not only could he not see any stars or the moon, there wasn't even a faint light. This was extremely abnormal. No matter how deep the night was, there should be a trace of light. Thinking of this, Lu Shihua immediately took out his personal terminal and used the scanning function of the personal terminal to scan the surrounding environment. He was horrified to find that he was more than 20 meters underground. He was buried alive. If you put yourself in his shoes, you would know that there was nothing more terrifying than being buried alive. Especially when you were trapped in a coffin. That feeling of not being able to do anything but silently waiting for death was a great fear. Under such fear, even the most optimistic person would fall into the predicament of a mental breakdown in a few hours. Just like Lu Shihua, who was trapped in the medical cabin. In the first hour after waking up, Lu Shihua could still maintain basic rationality and was trying hard to think of a way to escape from the medical cabin. From the first to the third hour after waking up, Liu Shihua had completely given up on the idea of escaping from the underground with her own strength. She began to recall her past life in an attempt to relieve the mental pressure. From the 3rd to the 5th hour after waking up, Liu Shihua began to cry loudly. She was no longer willing to think about anything and could only cry to vent her emotions. From the 5th hour after waking up, Liu Shihua did not know how much time had passed. During this period of time, Liu Shihua was completely silent. She no longer wanted to cry, nor did she want to think about anything else. She lay quietly in the medical cabin like a real zombie. However, this was not a good thing. It was because of the crazy accumulation of negative emotions. If this state continued for too long, Liu Shihua would eventually have a mental breakdown due to the excessive accumulation of negative emotions. When Liu Shihua's mental state was stretched to the extreme and was about to fall into a complete breakdown, a sudden light appeared and saved her. Like an angel, Jiyu Shenyuan appeared in front of her. At the moment of being rescued, Liu Shihua could no longer suppress his own emotions, and his negative emotions once again exploded forth, which resulted in the scene of Liu Shihua hugging Jiyu Shenyuan and crying out loud. Similarly, because his emotions exploded too intensely, Liu Shihua didn't notice a fact at all. The fact that his body wasn't covered at all, and the fact that he was just lying naked in Jiyu Xuanyuan's embrace. On the other side, Li Bai very considerately turned around. This could fully prove that Li Bai was a good person. So when Jiyu Shenyuan whispered in Liu Shihua's ear, telling her that she wasn't wearing any clothes, Liu Shihua let out an earth-shattering scream, and then hurriedly took out some clothes from her dimensional pocket, and quickly put them on. "Who is it? Who took off my clothes?" After putting on her clothes again, Liu Shihua began to look for the damned culprit. Unless it was some special circumstances, the medical pod's treatment did not require the complete exposure of one's body. Liu Shihua also remembered that although she had experienced a cruel pursuit, her clothes were still intact. Someone must have taken off her clothes after she fainted. Therefore, Liu Shihua's gaze landed on the only remaining male on the scene. Which was Li Bai. Could it be that Li Bai took off Liu Shihua's clothes? This was not an impossible thing, but an extremely possible thing. Think about it. When a passionate person like Li Bai suddenly saw the fresh body of a woman who had just died after 4 to 5 days of single life, it was very normal for him to have some lewd thoughts. Anyway, this woman was already dead, and would not jump out to cause trouble for Li Bai. Li Bai could do some indescribable things with a clear conscience. Therefore, what made Liu Shihua extremely worried was whether her pure and flawless body would be ruined in the hands of this animal. Chapter 1157. Why are you looking at Bai like that? Seeing Jiyu Shenyuan and Hua Yi's gaze, Li Bai suddenly felt uncomfortable. He said in a righteous tone, "Looking at Bai like this is insulting my character. Bai swears to the heavens that Bai has never done such a shameless and vulgar thing." First, he denied this matter completely. Then, as if to make his words more convincing, he continued, "Back then, Bai was also the #1 romantic figure in the divine capital. Back then, the thousands of female students in the divine capital all wanted to spend a night with Bai Fengliu and gain some of his favor. Even the #1 prostitute in the divine capital, Bright Moon, offered herself to Bai and couldn't bear to part with him for a month. Also, the #1 prostitute in the divine capital, Shong Shuang, couldn't bear to part with Bai. They even spent a night with Bai in the room. Bai even wrote a poem on the spot. The moonlight in front of the bed is like frost on the ground. Bai has played with so many beautiful girls. He definitely wouldn't have any bad intentions toward these two girls, Li Bai concluded. Something had to be explained here. The Tang dynasty had two special names, Divine Capital and Divine Capital. They referred to the capital of the Tang dynasty, Chang'an, and the eastern capital, Luoyang. As for female students, it meant brothel girls. Because Xue Dao was a talented girl in the Tang dynasty, she often sang poems with the scholars of that time. The poet, Wang Jian, wrote, "Female students by the bridge, living in seclusion under loquat flowers." How many scholars know? It's better to lead the spring breeze. Later generations called the talented and learned prostitutes female students or female students. So this is the meaning of your poem. Jiyu Shenyuan couldn't help but complain. He thought that Li Bai's poem meant that he missed his hometown. He didn't expect there to be such a story. Sigh, let's not talk about what happened back then. Anyway, Bai dares to swear to the heavens that when these two girls were buried, their clothes were still intact. Bai definitely didn't touch them at all. Li Bai swore to the heavens. It's not him. I remember now. I did it myself. At this time, Lu Shihua finally remembered what had happened to him. He said shyly, at that time, I thought I would be trapped here and die. I went crazy, and I don't know what I did. Now that I think about it, maybe I tore off my clothes at that time. If you don't believe me, look, these pieces of clothes are still in the medical cabin. Jiyu Shenyuan looked down and found that the torn clothes had sunk to the bottom of the medical bay. Through these shredded clothes, Jiyu Shenyuan could imagine the terrifying pressure Lu Shihua was under in the medical bay. You've worked hard. It's my younger brother's fault. My younger brother left you alone in Yuzhang City and ignored you for 3 years. That's why this happened. It's all that bastard's fault. I'll definitely teach him a lesson for you. Jiyu Shenyuan gritted her teeth and said, these words were not only said to Lu Shihua, but also to Guhan himself. It's not Master's fault. It's not Master's fault. He handed the sword pavilion to me, but I didn't manage it well. That's why it's like this now. It's all my fault. I've let down Master's expectations. Lu Shihua said with a face full of sincerity. It was obvious that she had really placed the blame on herself. This made Lu Shihua feel even more ashamed. What a good child. Jiyu Shenyuan touched Lu Shihua's head and praised. By the way, Sister Shenyuan, how is my master? When I left, I heard that Master was wanted by the Sword Committee. Is he okay now? Has he been caught by the Union of Swordsmen or the people of London? Is he safe now? When Lu Shihua calmed down, the first thing she did was to ask about her master's current situation. It was obvious how deep the friendship was. Don't worry, your master is fine. It's just that it's not convenient for him to show up now. He's killing Yuan Ku to kill time. When this period of time is over, I will tell your master and let your master come see you. Jiyu Shenyuan said in a gentle voice. There's no need for that. Lu Shihua shook her head. Master is in danger now. It's not convenient for him to show up. Lu Shihua can live well by himself. Master doesn't need to worry. I don't care about that. Anyway, I'll tell him about you. As for whether he comes to see you or not, that's up to him. Jiyu Shenyuan said with a sly tone. Lu Shihua nodded with a smile on his face. All right, two beautiful ladies. Although I don't want to disturb your reunion, don't you think it's a bit too much to leave another lady in the coffin? Li Bai, who was at the side, actually started to defend Sword Spirit Mu Shui. Right. And Sword Spirit Mu Shui, she must be suffocating in the medical pod. Let's hurry up and rescue her. Lu Shihua said nervously. She jumped out of the medical pod and prepared to open the lid of the medical pod to release Sword Spirit Mu Shui. There's no need. Thinking of this, Jiyu Shenyuan pressed Lu Shihua's hand and said calmly, she's not as lucky as you. She's already dead. What? Lu Shihua was so shocked that his legs became weak and he fell in front of Sword Spirit Mu Shui's medical pod. At this moment, Lu Shihua saw the words written on the screen of Sword Spirit Mu Shui's medical pod. Rescue failed. Sword wielder has died. My condolences. Actually, the moment Jiyu Shenyuan pulled the 2 medical pods out, she had already seen the words on the screen and knew that Sword Spirit Mu Shui was already dead. From the time of death displayed, Sword Spirit Mu Shui had already passed away yesterday afternoon. As mentioned before, due to Li Bai stalling for time, Mu Shui's sword spirit and Lu Shihua had missed the best time to be treated. Although they were still placed in the medical pods, whether they could be treated depended on their fates. Lu Shihua's fate was clearly much better than Mu Shui's. In the end, Lu Shihua survived, while Mu Shui's sword spirit was gone forever. Sword Spirit Mu Shui. Lu Shihua's nose turned sour and his tears uncontrollably gushed out. He directly laid on the cover of the medical pod and wailed. Compared to the incomparably sorrowful Lu Shihua, Jiyu Shenyuan appeared very calm. Although she was somewhat sad about the death of Mu Shui's sword spirit, this sadness was built on the foundation of Yuzhang City. Jiyu Shenyuan was only sad because Yuzhang City had lost a spirit sword level sword wielder, unlike Lu Shihua, who was sad about the death of Mu Shui's sword spirit. Who asked sword spirit Mu Shui to be extremely unfriendly towards Gu Han? In the previous trial, she even directly fought with Gu Han. Although in the end, it was Gu Han who completely suppressed sword spirit Mu Shui with his identity as a famous sword wielder and made her embarrassed in front of all the people of Yuzhang City. And this time, sword spirit Mu Shui had become Shi Yuan's accomplice. If it wasn't for sword spirit Mu Shui jumping out at the end to suppress sword spirit Mu Shui and actively cooperating with Shi Yuan to send Lu Shihua off, sword spirit Mu Shui wouldn't have died in this yellow sand. But then again, Jiyu Shenyuan was very curious about what happened to Lu Shihua and the others. What happened before they met Li Bai? Why were they chased by Yi Wenjun and the others? Jiyu Shenyuan expressed deep curiosity about this. So when Lu Shihua's emotions calmed down a little, Jiyu Shenyuan directly asked about the situation at that time. Yi Wenjun. After Lu Shihua was questioned by Jiyu Shenyuan, he immediately jumped up and said loudly, "Miss Shenyuan, you must quickly inform Yuzhang City that Yi Wenjun is a traitor. He has already betrayed Yuzhang City and pledged his allegiance to Yuan Ku and Jendi." Calm down. Jiyu Shenyuan patted Lu Shihua's shoulder. "I already know about Yi Wenjun's matter. When I came here, I already exposed his true colors. He is now locked in a desperate situation by me and can no longer come out. You don't have to worry about this. So that's how it is." Lu Shihua let out a long sigh of relief and told his story. After Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit left Yuzhang City, their journey was very normal and smooth. Although the Mu Shui sword spirit didn't have a good expression towards Lu Shihua along the way, and would occasionally ridicule Lu Shihua with disdain. But as a spirit sword level sword wielder's elder and expert, the Mu Shui sword spirit also fulfilled the responsibility of an elder. All the battles along the way were settled by the Mu Shui sword spirit, and it was the Mu Shui sword spirit that protected Lu Shihua all the way here. But unexpectedly, a huge unforeseen event happened 4 days ago. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit met a human lying in a pool of blood on the way. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit naturally did not hesitate to go and save this human. And Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit immediately recognized that this human was Yi Wenjun. Although Yi Wenjun's ability wasn't high, he was still the only successor of the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family. And the Mu Shui sword spirit, who was born in an aristocratic family, naturally wouldn't not recognize this descendant of Yuzhang City's #1 aristocratic family. As for Lu Shihua, being able to recognize Yi Wenjun was completely because of Gu Han. Back then, Yi Wenjun had appeared in the courtroom and saved Gu Han, so Lu Shihua had some impression of this thin and weak man. Later on, when Gu Han lived in Yuzhang City for a month, Yi Wenjun would often come to Gu Han's house to walk around, so Lu Shihua became even more familiar with Yi Wenjun. Since they recognized Yi Wenjun's identity, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit naturally didn't hesitate to start treating Yi Wenjun, and even brought Yi Wenjun for a walk. But they didn't expect that they didn't bring a former friend, but a ruthless wild wolf. Chapter 1158. After being treated by Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit, Yi Wenjun quickly regained consciousness. He told Lu Shihua and the others that he had joined Yuzhang City's mining team. When the mining team returned, he and 3 other famed swordsmen had left the team and formed a separate team, wanting to adventure and train nearby. However, they didn't expect to encounter a powerful meteor-class Yuan Ku nearby. Yi Wenjun and the others weren't a match for the meteor-class Yuan Ku at all. The 3 famed sword-rank sword-bearers all died at the Yuan Ku's hands. Only Yi Wenjun, who had a treasure passed down from the heaven-shrouding sword emperor, barely managed to escape. However, because of his heavy injuries, he fell into a coma. If Lu Shihua and the others hadn't saved him, he probably would have died here. After learning of Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit's goal, Yi Wenjun expressed his willingness to follow them to London. This way, they could take care of each other. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit did not suspect anything and naturally agreed to let Yi Wenjun temporarily join the team. Afterward, Yi Wenjun secretly told Lu Shihua that if she needed help, Yi Wenjun was willing to help her stall Mu Shui's sword spirit and create an opportunity for Lu Shihua to escape. She didn't want Lu Shihua to go to London and be humiliated by the people of London and the Dragon Lion Sword Emperor. However, Lu Shihua politely refused. Lu Shihua was not stupid. He was only an ancient sword-rank swordsman. Even if she escaped the control of the Mu Shui sword spirit, where could she run to? Moreover, about 5 out of 10 Yuan coups they met along the way were stronger than Lu Shihua. Compared to dying at the hands of Yuan coup, being humiliated in London was not a big deal. Therefore, Lu Shihua did not agree to Yi Wenjun's suggestion. However, Lu Shihua did not suspect that Yi Wenjun had bad intentions. Later that afternoon, Yi Wenjun suddenly told Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit that he had found a natural hot spring while adventuring nearby. The spring water was clear and emitted a strange fragrance. It was very good for the skin. He asked Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword spirit if they wanted to soak in the hot spring. At that time, the sky was about to turn dark, and there was no time to continue on their journey. In addition, women were completely unable to resist the temptation of the hot spring, so the sword spirit Mu Shui agreed after a moment of hesitation. Under Yi Wenjun's guidance, Lu Shihua and Mu Shui's sword spirit found a hot spring. This hot spring was just as Yi Wenjun had said, giving off a unique fragrance. However, this hot spring was not big. It was about the size of half an ordinary swimming pool. If a man and 2 women were to soak in the hot spring at the same time, it would be very inconvenient. At this moment, both Lu Shi and the Mu Shui sword spirit suddenly realized that they did not have their swimsuits with them. Thus, Yi Wenjun very tactfully indicated that he had already soaked here many times before, so there was no need for him to do it again. He could wait on the shore, and at the same time, he could act as a lookout in case Yuan Ku suddenly appeared. The Mu Shui sword spirit naturally had no objections. She had Yi Wenjun stand guard about 100 meters away from the hot spring, while she, her treasured sword Greatsword Maiden, and Lu Shihua's treasured sword Great Winged Angel Sword took off their clothes and entered the water. The reason why the Mu Shui sword maiden only let her treasured sword Greatsword Maiden soak in the hot spring, and not the higher-ranked famed sword grade and spirit sword Greatsword Maidens, was because these 2 sword maidens were artificial, and their personalities were not complete. Whether they soaked in the hot spring or not was meaningless to them. Thus, the Mu Shui sword maiden simply put these sword maidens into her dimensional pocket. This hot spring was indeed the best way to relieve fatigue in the world. Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword maiden had rushed for a long time, and after soaking in the hot spring, they felt their exhaustion disappear along with the hot spring. They would feel a little drowsy if they didn't go in, and the Mu Shui sword maiden directly fell asleep in the hot spring. Since Yi Wenjun was keeping watch, they were not worried that Yuan Ku would suddenly appear. This soak lasted for 4 to 5 hours. When Mu Shui and Lu Shihua felt that their skin couldn't take it anymore, they hurriedly climbed out of the hot spring. It was only at this time that these 2 careless women were shocked to find that all the clothes they had left on the shore were gone. The worst part was that the Mu Shui sword maiden had taken off her dimensional pocket out of habit when she bathed, and most of her sword maidens were directly placed in her dimensional pocket. Apart from the treasured sword Grade sword maiden that had soaked in the hot spring with her, the Mu Shui sword maiden had instantly lost all of her belongings. Fortunately, Lu Shihua firmly remembered the important points that her master Guhan had taught her to always remember. One of them was that the sword wielder must always carry their personal terminal and dimensional pocket with them at all times. These 2 were things that the sword wielder absolutely could not lose. Thus, Lu Shihua had always been soaking in the hot spring with her dimensional pocket. Fortunately, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword maiden still had clothes to wear. Otherwise, the 2 of them would have to run around naked in the desert. After they had put on their clothes, they immediately began to look for Yi Wenjun, who was in charge of watching over them, to ask him where their clothes had gone. At that time, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword maiden had never thought that Yi Wenjun might have betrayed humanity. In the end, they searched around the hot spring for an entire day, but they still could not find any trace of Yi Wenjun. Even then, aside from a little suspicion, they still did not consider that Yi Wenjun had purposely disappeared. They suspected that Yi Wenjun had encountered some powerful Yuan Ku, and was taken away by Yuan Ku before he could warn them. Of course, the reason was very hard to explain. If this Yuan Ku was so powerful that he could take away Yi Wenjun, who was a famed sword-level sword wielder, without anyone noticing, then why didn't he take Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword maiden as well? Moreover, this Yuan Ku wouldn't sneakily take away Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword maiden's clothes. Did Yuan Ku have any perverted fetishes? The Mu Shui sword maiden was about to go crazy. It didn't matter if the other things were lost, the Mu Shui sword maiden didn't feel the pinch. Only his famed sword-grade sword lady and spirit sword-grade sword lady were left. These were the lifeblood of a sword wielder. Losing these two sword ladies, the Mu Shui sword spirit would once again become a treasure sword-grade sword wielder. This was something that the Mu Shui sword spirit absolutely could not accept. After discussing for a while, the Mu Shui sword maiden decided to directly head to the nearest Land City ruins. That was the only gathering point nearby where human sword wielder would gather on a large scale. Perhaps they could find other human sword wielder and obtain their help. There was another huge reason for heading to the Land City ruins. After Lu Shihua opened his dimensional pocket, he helplessly told the Mu Shui sword maiden that there was less than a liter of pure water left in her dimensional pocket. The Mu Shui sword maiden naturally grumbled about this at first, blaming Lu Shihua for not bringing enough water with him. In the end, Lu Shihua could only helplessly say that she, the Mu Shui sword maiden, was worried that Lu Shihua would escape halfway, and forcibly took away all the pure water in Lu Shihua's dimensional pocket. The Mu Shui sword maiden felt that as long as there was no water in Lu Shihua's dimensional pocket, even if Lu Shihua escaped, he would die of thirst in the desert. It was for this reason that Lu Shihua's maglev flying car was also taken away by the Mu Shui sword maiden. At this time, the Mu Shui sword maiden thoroughly understood the meaning of the words reap what you sow. This was also the reason why they had to head to the Land City ruins to seek help from other sword wielder. After a long day of walking, Lu Shihua and the Mu Shui sword maiden finally arrived at the Land City ruins. However, after walking around the ruins for a few hours, they could only come to an incomparably sad conclusion. There was currently no second batch of human sword wielder in the Land City ruins. At that time, the sky had already darkened, so they could only temporarily hide in the ruins that Guhan had found. They barely managed to survive the night by relying on some cooked food, instant noodles, dry bread, and fruits. At this time, another advantage of Lu Shihua's personality showed itself. Lu Shihua liked to carry two items, or in other words, spare tires. This way, if something was damaged, Lu Shihua wouldn't be helpless. This was the reason why Jiyu Xian Yuan found traces of two tents in the ruins. Actually, these two tents belonged to Lu Shihua, and he had lent one to the Mu Shui sword maiden at the last moment. In the end, after that night, Lu Shihua's remaining liter of water was almost used up. Helpless, the Mu Shui sword maiden could only temporarily give up on the idea of looking for Yi Wenjun, and instead followed Lu Shihua to the water source near Land City. They had to first find enough water to sustain their lives. Lu Shihua was indeed worthy of being Guhan's disciple. Even the path of finding the oasis was the same as Guhan's plan. After experiencing more than 10 failures and spending a night in the desert, Lu Shihua and the others finally found the oasis in the desert. The moment they saw the oasis, the Mu Shui sword maiden impatiently ran over and fiercely drank a large mouthful of water to quench her incomparably parched lips. Lu Shihua first drank the last bit of purified water in the sword bottle, then found a container and filled it with enough water for them to drink. However, just as Lu Shihua put the water into his dimensional pocket, the Mu Shui sword maiden, who had rushed to drink the water from the oasis, suddenly fainted in front of Lu Shihua. At this time, Lu Shihua realized that there might be a big problem with the water. However, it was already too late. The Mu Shui sword maiden had already fainted. It was also at this time that the mastermind, Yi Wenjun, finally jumped out. The first thing he said was to tell Lu Shihua, "If you don't want the two of you to die here, then pass the position of Yuzhang City's sword pavilion master to him." It turned out that Yi Wenjun's ultimate goal was to become Yuzhang City's sword pavilion master. Chapter 1159. This guy is delusional. Does he think that you can pass the position of sword pavilion master to him with just a few words? Doesn't this require the people of Yuzhang City to accept? He's taking it for granted. Hearing Lu Shihua's words, Jiyu Shenyuan said angrily. However, Lu Shihua's expression turned extremely ugly after hearing that. He lowered his head and said in self-blame, "Actually, it's all my fault. If Master hadn't gone against the majority's opinion and passed the position of sword pavilion master to me, he wouldn't have had such an illusion." Lu Shihua's words sounded like he was blaming himself, but in reality, it was a slap to Jiyu Xuanyuan's face. Or rather, it was a slap to Guhan's face. This was because Guhan had ignored everyone's opposition and passed the position to Lu Shihua, who was still a commoner at that time. This was also the source of Yi Wenjun's delusion. Since Guhan could go against the majority's opinion and pass the position to Lu Shihua, then could he, Yi Wenjun, be like Lu Shihua? This was the harm of not abiding by the unspoken rules. P.S. The author would like to say that it is not a good thing for the main character in every book to ignore the rules of society and do something. However, at the same time, it will also destroy the stability of society. Just like the situation that Lu Shihua is facing now. This is the real feeling of society. I hope that readers who have not stepped into society can understand this point in advance, so that they don't meet with any unnecessary trouble after entering society. Anything else? Yi Wenjun's motive shouldn't be so simple, right? Jiyu Shenyuan sighed and said with certainty, this Yi Wenjun should have other motives. En. Lu Shihua nodded his head and said with a serious expression, he also wants the double-winged angel sword in my hands. Double-winged angel sword? What does he want your ancient sword-grade sword maiden for? This is already your sword lady, he wants your sword lady. Halfway through her words, Jiyu Shenyuan sucked in a breath of cold air. She had already guessed Yi Wenjun's intentions, and slowly spoke, he wants to ascend to the throne through the angel series of sword ladies. Yi Wenjun's talent was limited. Becoming a famed sword wielder was the limit of his talent. If Yi Wenjun's goal was to revive his heaven-shrouding family, then there was only one way for Yi Wenjun to succeed. That was to become an emperor and become an emperor sword wielder. That way, Yi Wenjun could easily revive the heaven-shrouding family. However, there were many problems. Firstly, the double-winged angel sword was already Lu Shihua's sword maiden. Even if Yi Wenjun killed Lu Shihua and made the double-winged sword maiden, he, become a famed sword wielder, would not be able to synchronize with the winged angel sword maiden. As if he saw the doubt on Jiyu Xuanyuan's face, Lu Shihua continued, at that time, I had also guessed Yi Wenjun's intentions. I also told him that he was already a famed sword rank swordsman, and that he would not be able to follow my path. Moreover, only people with the angel bloodline could synchronize with the angel sword, so he would not be able to succeed. But Yi Wenjun didn't listen to me at all. Instead, his face was full of confidence. I don't understand where he got the confidence to do this, Lu Shihua said in confusion. It's not that he has a way, but Ming Yuan Jendi has a way. Jiyu Shenyuan let out a long sigh. Ming Yuan Jendi can be said to be the longest living Jendi in this world. She is also the Jendi who understands sword wielder the best. Perhaps she can find a way to forcefully synchronize with them. En. Lu Shihua nodded thoughtfully, evidently agreeing with Jiyu Xuanyuan's guess. However, Lu Shihua did not know that there was another guess in Jiyu Xuanyuan's heart. I'm afraid that Ying Zheng has something to do with it. After all, he knows about the sword maiden grafting technique. Moreover, he has also improved the sword maiden grafting technique. He has already improved the method to forcefully seize the sword maiden of the sword wielder when the sword wielder and the sword maiden have already synchronized successfully. If that's the case, then wouldn't that mean? Thinking of this, Jiyu Xuanyuan's body suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. If Ying Zheng really succeeded in researching this sword maiden grafting technique, then wouldn't it mean that Ying Zheng could seize the sword maiden of any sword wielder at will, and then transfer the sword maiden to his loyal subordinates? If that was the case, then the greatest catastrophe of mankind was about to arrive. Understanding this point, Jiyu Shenyuan could not wait to rush to Yangjing City and have a big fight with Ying Zheng. She wanted to thoroughly find out what this person was hiding in the dark. But Jiyu Shenyuan quickly gave up this idea. Not to mention whether he was currently a match for Ying Zheng and the underground forces that Ying Zheng had hidden for more than 1,000 years. Even if he could win, it would inevitably be a long and drawn-out war. Moreover, Jiyu Shenyuan still had the hidden danger of the Execution Immortal Sword. Before solving the problem of the Execution Immortal Sword, Jiyu Shenyuan could not go find trouble with Ying Zheng. If Ying Zheng really has such an intention, then it must be a conspiracy that cannot tolerate even the slightest carelessness. Ying Zheng will need a lot of time to prepare. I hope that the next few months can pass peacefully. Jiyu Shenyuan could only make such a helpless decision. Then what happened? Jiyu Shenyuan then asked Lu Shihua, what happened after that? Later, Yi Wenjun wanted to forcibly take me away. Naturally, I was no match for Yi Wenjun. I was about to be controlled by Yi Wenjun. At that time, I had already made up my mind that if I fell into Yi Wenjun's hands, then I must commit suicide on the spot. This way, I might be able to disrupt Yi Wenjun's plan. Lu Shihua said in a tragic tone. Clearly, this was Lu Shihua's true thoughts. Lu Shihua had already decided to commit suicide. However, Yi Wenjun had forgotten that the sword spirit Mu Shui's treasure sword Maiden was the 5 Poisons Sword Lady. And the 5 Poisons Sword Lady's sword scar contract had the effect of alleviating the poison in her sword wielder. Lu Shihua continued, in Yi Wenjun's original plan, the poison he used should have been enough to kill the sword spirit Mu Shui. However, the sword spirit Mu Shui managed to pull through. Just as I was about to be captured by Yi Wenjun, the sword spirit Mu Shui saved me. Although the sword spirit Mu Shui was a spirit sword tier sword wielder, she was only left with the treasure sword Maiden. Furthermore, her body was also affected by the poison, so the circulation of her sword essence was not very smooth. Therefore, even if I joined forces with the sword spirit Mu Shui, we were still no match for Yi Wenjun. We could only reluctantly not fight or retreat. Later on, Yi Wenjun found a black sword. That black sword could actually fight with us in the air without anyone using it. Later on, Yi Wenjun even summoned a large group of Yuan Ku. The sword spirit Mu Shui and I were completely no match for him. We could only run for our lives. Because we discovered a sandstorm in the distance, we planned to sneak into the sandstorm and borrow the power of the sandstorm to escape. Lu Shihua's words were said very calmly, but the tragedy in them was incomparable. Lu Shihua had taken the initiative to enter the sandstorm. Admittedly, she could have let the powerful sandstorm sweep her up and borrow the power of the sandstorm to escape, but how many people in history could survive a sandstorm? Later on, I discovered that it wasn't a sandstorm, but a white-clothed man practicing his sword. The sandstorm we saw was all the sword chi of the white-clothed man. Later on, we were saved by the white-clothed man. But at that time, I was about to faint and didn't have the strength to talk to the white-clothed man. I could only use the last bit of my will to throw out the 2 medical pods in my dimensional pocket. I didn't expect that when I opened my eyes again, I would already be buried underground. At this point, Lu Shihua finally finished narrating her experience. At the same time, she realized that the white-clothed man in front of her and Jiyu Shenyuan should be the white-clothed man who had saved her. Big sister Shenyuan, is this your boyfriend? Lu Shihua's head twitched, and she suddenly asked this question. Cough cough. What nonsense are you talking about? Bai, he is innocent. Li Bai's face turned red, and without waiting for Jiyu Shenyuan to explain, he took the initiative to say this. But Li Bai's rebuttal sounded more like a kind of acknowledgement. What nonsense are you talking about? He is Li Bai, a Yuan Ku. Jiyu Shenyuan fiercely glared at Lu Shihua. Yuan Ku. Hearing this, Lu Shihua panicked, and was about to grab her 2-winged angel sword, but she was stopped by Jiyu Shenyuan. This Lord Li Bai is a little strange, he seems to be a free agent, don't use force for now. Oh. Lu Shihua obediently responded, and no longer made threatening gestures. But after explaining to Lu Shihua, Jiyu Xuanyuan's heart surged with a trace of doubt. In fact, this doubt had long been on Jiyu Xuanyuan's whereabouts. Lu Shihua didn't know the specific situation of Li Bai, but Jiyu Shenyuan knew that Li Bai had actually just transmigrated to this world. According to the common knowledge that Jiyu Shenyuan knew, any Yuan Ku who had just arrived in this world would be polluted by filth, and would instinctively be the enemy of humans. This Yuan Ku, why did this Li Bai not seem to be affected at all, and instead seemed like a normal human? Why are you looking at me? Is there anything strange about me? Li Bai noticed that Jiyu Xuanyuan's gaze suddenly fell on him, and immediately felt goosebumps all over his body. Even his voice became a little bashful. Lord Li Bai, can I trouble you to take off your clothes? Jiyu Shenyuan suddenly popped out such a sentence, causing Li Bai to turn pale with fright. What are you trying to do? Li Bai tightly hugged his upper body. I am a poet with principles. I will not be tempted by your beauty, although you are indeed very beautiful. Noisy. Jiyu Xuanyuan's violent sword chi directly struck Li Bai's body, and Li Bai's clothes were instantly torn into pieces. Chapter 1160. Jiyu Shenyuan sliced open Li Bai's clothes not to admire Li Bai's jade-like body, but to see if there was a small hole on Li Bai's body. According to Misaka Mikoto, any Yuan Ku who was contaminated by filth would inevitably have a small hole on their body. That was the best evidence that the other party had been contaminated by filth. Therefore, Jiyu Shenyuan sliced open Li Bai's clothes to see if Li Bai had been contaminated by filth. As it turned out, Li Bai's upper body was white and clean, without any wounds or small holes. It was obvious that he had not been contaminated by filth. This also explained why Li Bai was so different from other Yuan Ku who had suddenly appeared. He would take the initiative to help humans instead of being their enemy. Jiyu Shenyuan was puzzled as well. This was something that had never happened before. Even a good person like Misaka Mikoto was a murderer who killed countless people. She was only able to break free from the control of the filthy world after a miraculous encounter and became a free person. However, why was Li Bai, a Yuan Ku who had just transmigrated, not contaminated by filth? Even with Jiyu Xuanyuan's intelligence, it was difficult for her to figure out the reason in such a short amount of time. She could only conclude that it was a coincidence. Sister Shenyuan, where are we going next? Are we going back to Yuzhang City? Lu Shihua asked Jiyu Shenyuan weakly after putting Mu Shui's sword spirit's corpse into his dimensional pocket. There's no hurry. Jiyu Shenyuan shook her head and said to Lu Shihua, the most important thing now is to solve your problem. My problem? Lu Shihua was stunned. What problem do I have? Haven't I already been rescued by you, big sister? Your life was saved, but what about your future? Jiyu Shenyuan patted Lu Shihua's head. What future do I have? Other than causing trouble for master and sister, there's nothing I can do. Lu Shihua said with an extremely gloomy expression. Jiyu Shenyuan of course knew the reason for Lu Shihua's gloomy expression. Her hand suddenly pressed down hard on Lu Shihua's head, as she spoke in a low voice. Do you think that Yi Wenjun, in a situation where he does not have the confidence to ascend to the throne, would directly attack your opponent to snatch the twin-winged angel's sword? Elder sister, you mean to say? Lu Shihua's eyes suddenly revealed a look of incomparable surprise. She had already understood the hidden meaning in Jiyu Xuanyuan's words. That's right, I think Yi Wenjun definitely knows where the four-winged angel sword is hidden. I must find back the future you lost. Jiyu Shenyuan said while gnashing her teeth. Sister, this is too troublesome. I am master's disciple, not sister's disciple. Sister has done so much for me, I really can't repay you, Lu Shihua said helplessly. Silly child, don't forget that you saved my life. I owe you a life. This has nothing to do with my brother. Jiyu Shenyuan didn't wait for Lu Shihua to say anything. With a move of her mind, she directly entered the trial array through the jasper stone ring on her hand. She directly arrived in front of Yi Wenjun, who was imprisoned in a hopeless situation. Yi Wenjun had only been imprisoned for a few hours, but the current Yi Wenjun was already like a dead person, lying on the ground without any signs of life. Some of the food that had been prepared around her was also untouched. It looked like Yi Wenjun didn't want to live anymore. What? The successor of the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family only has this little ability and breadth of mind. I haven't even planned to kill you yet, and you're already planning to commit suicide? Jiyu Shenyuan said lightly beside Yi Wenjun. Hearing Jiyu Xuanyuan's voice, Yi Wenjun silently opened her eyes, only to find that a transparent figure had appeared in front of her. This was Jiyu Xuanyuan's mind, not Jiyu Xuanyuan's physical body. The jasper stone ring could allow people to quickly return to the trial array, but it didn't have the ability to teleport people out. Therefore, although Jiyu Shenyuan could immediately appear in front of Yi Wenjun with her physical body, she would need to spend a lot of time to walk out of Chongyang Mountain. This was undoubtedly not a cost-effective deal. Don't worry, when I'm about to starve to death, I will eat. I won't commit suicide, Yi Wenjun said with a stiff voice. I won't beat around the bush with you. Do you know where the four-winged angel's sword is? Jiyu Shenyuan asked directly. I do know, Yi Wenjun very straightforwardly admitted, but he quickly said with an incomparably resentful voice, but why should I tell you? Even if you kill me, I won't tell you. I'll let your little brother's disciple be an ancient sword wielder for the rest of his life. Of course I know you don't want to tell me. Jiyu Shenyuan wasn't surprised by Yi Wenjun's attitude. At the same time, she was already prepared. Let's make a deal. If you tell me where the four-winged angel's sword is, I'll let your heaven-shrouding aristocratic family live. What do you mean by that? Yi Wenjun suddenly raised his head and stared at Jiyu Xuanyuan's eyes. What do you want to do to my heaven-shrouding aristocratic family? I don't have any schemes, nor do I have any bad ideas. I just need to report everything that you've done to the headquarters. What do you think the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family will do? What will happen to the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family's reputation? Jiyu Shenyuan said incomparably calmly. You. How could you do this? You can't do this. All of this is my, Yi Wenjun's, fault. It has nothing to do with the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family. You can't do this to the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family. Are you worthy of the help that heaven-shrouding Jendi has given you? Don't forget, this is heaven-shrouding Jendi. It's a trial formation left behind by my ancestor. Without my ancestor, how could you have the power you have now, and how could you lock me up here? You can't do this. You definitely can't do this. Yi Wenjun cried out. It was clear that Jiyu Xuanyuan's words had already pinched Yi Wenjun's Achilles heel. To him who loved his family more than anything else, if his family's name was ruined because of him, it would definitely be more painful than killing him 1,000 or 10,000 times. That's my little brother's benefit. It has nothing to do with me. Jiyu Shenyuan coldly laughed. Tell me where the four-winged angel's sword is, and I'll help you keep this a secret. I'll just say that you died on the battlefield. I'll give you the treatment of a hero. You. Yi Wenjun seemed to want to curse out loud, but he quickly shut his mouth, and his whole body shriveled up in the corner. Jiyu Shenyuan waited for a full 10 minutes, before Yi Wenjun slowly spoke. You can't scare me. You also know that I'm the last bloodline of the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family. You won't let me out. Sooner or later, I'll die in this prison. When I die, the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family will no longer exist. What would I need the reputation of the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family for? Jiyu Shenyuan didn't expect Yi Wenjun to react so quickly. Just as Jiyu Shenyuan was pondering whether he should take out Yi Wenjun's DNA and help him create a descendant through artificial insemination, to give him hope, Yi Wenjun immediately said, I still have one more request. If you can agree to it, I'll tell you the location of the four-winged angel's sword. Tell me, as long as it's a reasonable request, I'll agree to it. Jiyu Shenyuan nodded. I have an illegitimate child. Yi Wenjun immediately revealed a shocking secret. My heart is already completely on Yi Fei, so I've always been unwilling to admit that this child has a mother. But now, I can't admit it. He's the last bloodline of the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family. Promise me, as long as you're willing to help me take care of my child, give him a bright future, and let him revitalize the heaven-shrouding aristocratic family, I'll tell you where the four-winged angel's sword is. A reasonable request. I promise you. Jiyu Shenyuan didn't hesitate at all. Good. I believe you too. Yi Wenjun actually had no other choice but to trust Jiyu Shenyuan, so he straightforwardly gave the answer that Jiyu Shenyuan wanted. The four-winged angel's sword is now in Glastonbury, but you know what kind of place it is. Whether or not you can get the four-winged angel's sword will depend on your own ability. Glastonbury. Jiyu Shenyuan didn't expect that the last thing Yi Wenjun told him would be a place like this. This made Jiyu Shenyuan feel all sorts of emotions, as well as the wonders of fate. You're saying that the four-winged angel's sword is now in Glastonbury's St. Arthur Church? Yes. It's right there. Yi Wenjun nodded very seriously. Understood. Jiyu Shenyuan looked at Yi Wenjun, who was like a dead person, and couldn't help but feel a surge of sympathy in her heart. However, she couldn't forgive Yi Wenjun for the sins he had committed, so she could only say faintly, "Other than that, do you have any other instructions?" "No." Yi Wenjun shook his head. "What about your child?" Jiyu Shenyuan said again, "Don't you have anything to say to that illegitimate child of yours?" Yi Wenjun's expression finally changed. After hesitating for a long time, he finally said, "Tell him that his father was just an ordinary person. He went out to fight normally, and died normally in the desert. Let him only remember one sentence for the rest of his life." "What sentence?" "Light comes from the sun, darkness comes from the heart." This was probably the most philosophical sentence Yi Wenjun had ever said in his life. However, Jiyu Shenyuan had already gotten the answer she wanted. Her ghost-like body instantly turned into a puff of green smoke and disappeared without a trace. Her consciousness returned to her body again. She touched Lu Shihua's head and said with a strange expression, "Let's go. Finish the task you didn't complete, and the two of us will go to London." You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.